that are there. We are looking through those now. We'll make a decision very soon.
George Fenton.
14, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, the Department is working closely with the Department of Health and Social Care and NHS England to improve access to community health services, including speech and language therapy for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, and we've extended the Early Language and Support for Every Child programme.
Currently about 60,000 children waiting for their first speech and language therapy appointment, with some waiting for over a year. Like with a lot of SEND problems, it happens because health and education aren't working that well together. So can the Minister tell me what we're doing to bring allied health professionals, including speech and language therapists, closer to school so that families don't fall through the cracks?
Mr Speaker, I welcome the opportunity to discuss this with the Honourable Member last week, and I'm grateful for his work on the Health and Social Care Committee on this issue. We both agreed the need for partners to work together to fix the SEND system, and I'll be working closely with ministers from the Department for Social Care and Health to move towards a better system which works for all.
Mr Speaker, my constituency sits in Kirklees, which continues to face some of the most severe pressures in the country on high needs and SEND provision, including long waits for EHCP assessments and strained specialist support. What additional resources will the Department of Education provide to ensure children with special education needs and disabilities in areas like Dewsbury and Batley receive timely and proper support?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In this financial year, we've already put £1 billion into the high needs budget and £740 million into specialist places around the country. We're committed to supporting schools to provide inclusive provision, and we'll be setting out more plans in the Schools White Paper.
Jones.
15, Mr Speaker.
Mr Speaker, we're committed to investing and improving the SEND system. This financial year, as I've just set out, we've invested an extra £1 billion into the high needs block and £740 million into specialist places. The core schools budget for 2026 to 27 will total £67 billion compared to £65.3 billion in 2025-26. This additional funding will provide an above real terms per pupil increase in overall schools funding, which will take per pupil funding to its highest ever level and help us to transform the SEND system.
Jones.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In Wokingham, there are not enough SEND places for pupils, meaning that they have to travel outside of the borough and sometimes a long way from their home to go to school. In 2022, Wokingham bid for 2 SEND schools. They were given those 2 SEND schools, but nothing has happened since then. The government has still not committed any funding towards those 2 schools. So will the Minister confirm now when the funding for these 2 schools will be released to enable the Council to start building those schools?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr Speaker. We are absolutely committed to children being educated in their local community, and I've seen the difference that the £740 million we've put into specialist places has made children able to be educated in resource bases linked to schools. But to your question about the 2 schools, as my honourable friend next to me has set out, we'll be hoping to set out those answers as soon as possible.
Chair of the Select Committee, Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This morning I visited the Needover Lands Centre, a specialist college in my constituency, and enjoyed a delicious cup of tea made by students Marco and Jason. Needover Lands means fly the nest, and the college provides education and training on independent living and employability skills for young people with special educational needs and disabilities up to the age of 25. Will the Minister join me in celebrating NatSpec's Power of Specialist FE Awareness Week? And will she provide assurances that the government's SEND reform proposals will fully recognise the vital role of specialist colleges and the need for sustainable funding so that every young person who can benefit from a specialist college placement can access one?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I would very much like to celebrate this week and agree on the importance of access to specialist colleges and to support for children into work. And I visited specialist provision where I've seen how proud head teachers are to support children into supported internships, to support them onto their next steps. They're doing incredibly important work. and our schools white paper is looking at how we support children with special educational needs to thrive into adulthood.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Speaker, on the 16th of June, I asked the Secretary of State what she understood to be the drivers behind the exponential rise in numbers of children with special educational needs. And she said, my department and the Department of Health and Social Care are keen to understand the drivers behind that phenomenon. Can I ask what work she's done in the intervening 6 months and what she understands better today than she did on the 16th of June?
Mr. Speaker, we are absolutely committed to supporting children with special educational needs and to understanding why we're seeing increases. A lot of the evidence is saying we are a lot better at diagnosing and understanding their needs, which is a positive thing, but we are continuing to work with colleagues in health to review the evidence and to understand how we can best intervene and support children, and critically not have to wait for a diagnosis, but to be able to support children at the point that needs emerge.
Mr. Speaker, I really welcome the government's increase in funding to SEND. However, almost 8,000 children in Liverpool now require an EHCP, and this has doubled over the past 3 years, with many parents struggling to find a school place that meets the need of their children. So can the Minister please provide assurances to Liverpool Parents and Carers Association that plans in the budget to move the financial responsibility for SEND from local authorities to the Department of Education will be given the funding it needs to provide support to children who need it, including for earlier intervention, adequate specialist places and inclusive mainstream support?
Mr. Speaker, I can assure my honourable friend that we are already investing in special educational needs and we will continue to invest in special educational needs.
Jonathan Brash.
Question number 19, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Learning to enjoy books is a critical foundation for every child. So as we get ready for the National Year of Reading in Hartlepool and across the country, our new Best Start in Life family hubs will support families to read, and new books and libraries for schools will ensure the benefits of reading reach right into adulthood.
Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Lindsay Hogg, has successfully brought a Penguin Little Library to her community in Hartlepool. Designed to celebrate Penguin's 90th anniversary, they aim to promote a joy of reading. Now, Hartlepool Council leader Labour's Pamela Hargreaves, inspired by Lindsay's brilliant work, has promised to expand this excellent idea right across the town. Does the Minister agree with me that this fantastic initiative will help families with access to books, inspire a love of reading, and will she commit to visiting Hartlepool to see these little libraries for herself?
I do agree. I would love to come and visit, and I congratulate Lindsay Hogg and Hartlepool Council for this brilliant idea. And Mr. Speaker, Matilda is one of my favourite Penguin books, and can I say it's a perfect allegory for our times. Smart women who love reading, standing up to snake oil salesmen and bullies.
Gregor Mahindra.
Mr. Speaker, reading to children at the start of nursery and school is especially important for those that suffer from special educational needs. As we heard last week, the OBR has questioned the £6 billion taken away from local authorities. I know that the whole House wants to resolve the issue about SEND, so can the Minister give assurance about when we will get further details to make sure by 2028 the whole sector knows how each child is going to get the best provision possible, especially those in South West Hertfordshire?
I've answered his question already today, so I will simply say this government is completely committed to ensuring that every child gets the best possible start in life, including repairing the broken system of family support services decimated by the Conservatives opposite, and ensuring that every single child has the opportunity to read, to talk to their friends, to play, to communicate and to get ready for school and have the best possible start in life.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 16 months I've visited... Oh, I'm so sorry. Question 20.
20.
Mr. Speaker, I've seen the difference that fully accessible schools make for young people. Pupils have proudly shown me the sensory spaces they use to help self-regulate, and schools have helped create inclusion hubs supporting young people to thrive. The department's invested £740 million in high needs capital to support children and young people with SEND, including through adapting classrooms to improve accessibility.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 16 months, I've visited most of my 42 schools, some more than once. So I've seen some really effective schools using occupational therapy principles, such as removing sensory triggers, updating lighting and layouts. And in Coal Hill First School, they've simplified and replicated the decor throughout a child's progress through the school and are looking to invest in wooden and natural materials to create a calming environment. But, Mr. Speaker, the schools in Mid Dorset and North Poole receive over £2,000 per pupil per year less than in other parts of the country. So there's little left for this sort of project. And given the focus on inclusion, what can the Minister offer in terms of smaller capital grants to fund this sort of work?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for sharing those wonderful examples of best practice, and that's the work we want to do to ensure that all of our schools are inclusive, and there's obviously a lot to learn from your constituency. My honourable friend will be bringing forward an estate strategy, and we continue to invest in specialist places within mainstream schools.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Failed, humiliated and made feel too much trouble for schools to look after. That's how one Derby mum says her son and she felt, he has cerebral palsy and was offered a school place a staggering 14 months when he was out of school, and it still didn't meet his needs. Does the Minister agree that we urgently need to invest in schools to make sure the facilities are fit for these children who have special educational needs to be able to attend fully?
Mr. Speaker, I'm so sorry to hear that story, and sadly I've heard too many like that of children who are kept out of education because schools are not able to meet their needs. That's the legacy we inherited, and that's why we are investing £740 million into improving the accessibility of our school buildings.
David Hines.
Number 21.
Estate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, the Independent Curriculum and Assessment Review published its final report, and I'd like to reiterate my thanks to Professor Becky Francis and the panel for all of their work. We will reform Progress 8 to balance a strong academic core with breadth and student choice, so that every child can both achieve academically and thrive personally, and we will consult on this shortly.
David Hines.
Mr. Speaker, Professor Francis was clear that the EBAC grouping should be kept in the Progress 8 measure under the heading of academic breadth. The government has overruled this review, which is quite a big thing to do. The Secretary of State herself, I believe, used to be a student of modern languages. Have they learned nothing from their terrible error in 2004, or what does she have today against modern languages and humanities?
Mr. Speaker, I do love modern languages. I was a very keen student of them myself, but I'm afraid the right honourable gentleman will know that the EBAC didn't drive improved access to modern foreign languages. He knows that. He will have looked at the data, and I don't think the system as it stands provides the right balance. It unnecessarily constrains student choice, it affects students' engagement, and it's hampered progress in subjects which strengthen our economy and society. I believe in high standards, strong foundations, academic achievement, but I also believe that access to subjects like music, sport and vocational subjects should be the right of every child, not just the lucky few.
Question 22, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Department has invested £740 million in high needs capital in 2025-26 to support place creation for children and young people with SEND. Local authorities can use this funding to create specialist places in mainstream schools, enhance accessibility and provide special school places for pupils with the most complex needs.
Bob Blatton.
I thank the Minister for that answer. The last government approved the new SEND school in Harrow, which is supported on a cross-party and by all head teachers in Harrow. At the moment, young children have to go an hour and a half each way to get to specialist schools, which is costing the taxpayer huge amounts of money. It is unacceptable for the children with those special educational needs. All we need now is the department to give its approval, and that school could go ahead and start almost immediately. So if this funding is available, will she then make it available to the London Borough of Harrow to start the school that everyone wants?
Well,
Mr. Speaker, the last government approved a huge amount of things that were not funded, and that's why this government was left with a black hole that we are sorting out. I know I have travelled around the country talking to parents And we have heard time and time again about how they were failed by the last government. And we are investing in the SEND system. In answer to your specific question about the schools, we'll be coming forward with more plans shortly.
We come to Doppler's, Jill Robertson.
Number one, sir.
Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, Labour believes that background shouldn't determine what you go on to achieve in life. We see child poverty as a moral scar on our country. When last in government, we lifted 600,000 children out of poverty. During their time in government, the Tories plunged 900,000 children into poverty. The seismic decision taken at last week's budget to remove the appalling two-child limit will lift 450,000 children out of poverty, and that will rise to 550,000 children alongside other measures like the expansion of free school meals. This will drive the largest expected reduction in child poverty in a parliament, transforming life chances, investing in our children and delivering for schools.
Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Government has taken responsibility from SEND funding away from local authorities like the Isle of Wight Council, but it can't explain where the money is coming from. Surely the Secretary of State understands how concerned parents are up and down the country. She can reassure them right now and explain where the money is coming from, or is she in fact planning cuts?
Mr Speaker, I do recognise the very real worry that parents across the country have about the system of support for children with SEND, which he and the party opposite left on its knees. He would do well to reassure parents, not to scaremonger, and I would suggest he goes away from here, reads the budget document, reads what the OBR has to say, and not to listen to his front bench.
Dan Carden.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Archbishop Beck Catholic College in my constituency has lost £700 per pupil since 2011, while the number of disadvantaged pupils has risen from 38% to 52%. It's an excellent school with strong leadership and creating great outcomes for pupils. And could I ask the Minister to look specifically at the funding calculation for Archbishop Beck and to say a little bit about how she is getting resources into deprived areas. Thank you.
Mr Speaker, I'm really grateful for the work of the school that you mentioned. I've set out today the further investment we are putting into schools, including into special educational needs, and we are focusing our funding on all schools, but particularly supporting schools in the most deprived areas.
We come to Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And there is a good reason why we have an independent economic forecaster in this country. And that's because, thankfully, they do not let the government get away with saying that £6 billion can be absorbed across government at a time when the spending review has already allocated all of the money. So let's have no more of this nonsense. Where is the £6 billion coming out of? Is it SEND or is it schools?
Where's the money?
Mr Speaker, let me be absolutely clear. These are council deficits. They will not be coming from school budgets. Over the course of this Parliament, we are investing more in SEND. We are picking up the pieces of a system on its knees left behind by the party opposite. Either the Right Honourable Lady hasn't read what the OBR has to say, or she is seeking to willfully mislead parents and scaremonger. It wasn't a priority for her in our conference speech. It's not a priority for her now.
Sorry, but we can't get away with misleading. It's like lying, so I'm sure the Secretary of State will withdraw that.
Of course, Mr Speaker.
Marvellous. Or a troll.
Mr Speaker, the Right Honourable Lady can rail against the forecast, the Tories, her own leaky backbenchers, and probably, privately, the Treasury, all she likes. But the spending review has set departmental budgets for the year in question. There isn't £6 billion down the back of the sofa. So, unless she can say where else this £6 billion is coming from out of government Ardell, and clearly she's just failed to do so, it must be coming out of schools or SEND. So let's try again. Will she be straight with teachers and parents and her own backbenchers and tell us what is being cut? Is it SEND or is it schools?
Where's it coming from?
Mr Speaker, I don't know if the Right Honourable Lady listened to what I just said. It is not coming out of school budgets, and we are investing more in SEND.
Please. It's not helpful to speak back at me either. You're completely wrong. And if we're setting education standards, I don't think it's a good way to do it. Secretary of State.
Mr Speaker, the OBR published projections about SEND costs alongside the budget. They were hypothetical illustrations which the Right Honourable Lady would know if she went away and read the OBR document. The Treasury has been clear that the costs will be covered across overall budgets, but we are investing more in SEND, more in capital. We are delivering for our children, and we will be setting out further plans for reform next year. If she wants to work with us to get this right, I'd be grateful.
But please, these people in.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I understand that 1,000 careers advisors the government committed to introduce will now sit within job centres. Can the Minister outline how her department will work with the DWP to ensure that improving careers advice in schools remains a priority? Reaching children in primary schools now is incredibly important for promoting the technical career routes that our economy is going to rely on in the future.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend for the question. My noble friend, the Minister for Skills, is working across both departments to ensure that we bring the very important work on careers and early entry to work programmes together across government. I've myself seen great collaboration between both departments in Youth Hub in my own constituency, and the government is still committed to improving work experience for children at secondary schools and early careers education as well.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We found out last week that the International Student Levy will raise £445 million from our universities, but only 1% of that will go to the maintenance grants that ministers have claimed to justify this damaging tax on our universities. Worse still, the flat fee design hits hardest those universities doing the most to serve students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So can the Secretary of State tell us, will more or fewer disadvantaged students access university as a result of this policy?
Mr Speaker, we are investing the International Student Levy into support around skills and access to high-quality further and higher education colleges targeted on students who most need that support in areas, in subjects most closely aligned to our industrial strategy and government priorities. This will make a huge difference to young people from not very well-off backgrounds, allowing them to access university. And we're backing our universities with the measures that we've set out around tuition fee increases that will give our institutions stability.
Tom Rutland.
Mr Speaker, under the Conservatives, too many children's life chances were scarred by poverty. But thanks to the choices made by this Labour government last week, nearly 1,300 children in East Worthing and Shoreham are set to have their futures brightened. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it's only under a Labour government that all children get the best start in life?
Mr Speaker, the party opposite might not be serious about tackling child poverty, but the Labour Party is and always has been. Under this government, we will lift 450,000 children out of poverty alongside other measures such as Best Start family hubs, expanding childcare and new free breakfast clubs. And I
think I've heard enough. I don't need a running commentary on what somebody might be or not, Turkey, wherever. OK. Secretary of State, I think we've got the... Let's go on then. Ian Room.
Mr Speaker, forces families sometimes find a child's ECHP is not automatically recognised when they are reported to a new area, leaving children without provision. With the Children's Services White Paper due next year, will the Minister ensure military children are specifically included and raise the issue of adopting the MOD LAP system with local authorities that currently do not use it?
Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for raising those points, and I will absolutely look into them, and I would be very helpful if the honourable member could write to me about those issues.
Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I think I must have missed something in the answer that the Secretary of State gave to my honourable friend, the member for the Isle of Wight, and the Shadow Minister. Schools in my constituency haven't got enough money to pay for SEND pupils. It's no good the Secretary of State talking about capital expenditure and more on this and more on that. What we need to know is, where is the money coming from to pay the revenue costs incurred by SEND pupils?
Mr Speaker, that's why we've put an extra £1 billion into high-need budgets this year. The capital that he very casually dismisses is in order to deliver more specialist places for children closer to home, including in mainstream schools. he must surely recognise that the system that we have at the moment just isn't working. I've heard from too many parents and too many schools that change is needed. If the party opposite want to get serious about this and work constructively on a big challenge that we face, then I would really, really welcome that. But sadly, we just get these cheap shots all the time.
Shankar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier this year, I met brilliant Derby apprentices at Alstom who are building their futures as they build the future of our rail. But persistently, low start rates in the East Midlands have left too many of our young people missing out on opportunities apprenticeship give. So would the Minister tell us what steps she has taken so young people can start the apprenticeships that they need? Thanks.
I thank my honourable friend for this question. He himself was an apprentice before entering this place, and he welcomed the Secretary of State to his constituency to open a Technical Excellence College in construction not that long ago. The main thing from the budget that I took away last week, which is extremely welcome, is that from next academic year we will fully fund SME apprenticeships for people aged 16 to 24, which will do a lot to answer the question he is asking.
A game of strategy, tactics and sometimes outright brinkmanship might be something that is very familiar to the Cabinet at the moment. I'm actually talking about chess. Meadowview Primary School in my constituency has qualified for the London Chess Classic, which takes place tomorrow. So will the Education Secretary join me in congratulating them in getting so far and wish them luck?
Yeah. Absolutely, I join the right honourable lady. I wish them all the very best, and to all those taking part, it's a wonderful opportunity for those young people.
Sonny Kumar.
Speaker, the zebra crossing outside Redhall Primary School, Lower Gornal, spans both sides of a busy road, putting children at risk each day as they cross between sites with no patrol and frequent unsafe driving. And I've urged the Council to act. What work is my right honourable friend taking with the Secretary of State for Transport to ensure adequate funding and support for road safety?
I thank my honourable friend for raising that point. I'm very happy to follow up with her. If she writes to me with the details, I'll be very happy to speak to colleagues at the Department for Transport.
Julian Lewis.
Despite the Secretary of State's robust answer on Chinese influence on academia, dare I set her a little homework? Would she like to take a look at the relevant section of the Non-Partisan Intelligence and Security Committee's report on China, published in July 23, and she will find a lot of interesting and worrying information in that report.
I recognise the right honourable gentleman's expertise and interest in this area, and I would be very happy to do so.
Callum Anderson.
Speaker, I was pleased to see the forthcoming curriculum reforms acknowledge the importance of financial capability for young people. But there is an immediate challenge of scant financial education that exists now that must be addressed. So can the Minister update the House on how the Department is working with civil society and the financial sector to ensure that young people are getting quality financial education now?
Mr. Speaker, young people always say when I talk to them about education how important it is for them to get that financial education. It's something we've recognised in our response to the curriculum review, and we're very committed to working with civil society to deliver this. And if the honourable member has ideas of organisations that we can work with, then we're very open to that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Herefordshire, families of children with special educational needs and indeed Herefordshire Council have been waiting more than 18 months for an update on two crucial schools, a new free school, specialist provision for children with autistic spectrum disorder and the rebuild of Westfield Special School. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss how we can make progress on ensuring these vital school places are provided locally for these children?
I thank the honourable member for raising this question about school buildings. As I've previously said to the House, it's really important that we get the policy in exactly the right place regarding special educational needs and the future of the schools system. We're getting there, and I will be able to share very soon an update on those projects. I'll be very happy to meet with her in the near future.
Rachel Maskell.
Mr. Speaker, City of York Council has gone from requires improvement to outstanding all areas due to the innovation it is driving, particularly around children in social care, halving the number of children there, ending the use of agency workers and setting up a SEND hub. The Director of Adult Children's Social Care would like the Secretary of State to visit. Would she come to York and see what we're doing?
I'm grateful to the honourable lady. I was in York just recently with our honourable friend, the member for York Outer, but I'll be delighted to return and to talk about the brilliant progress that the Council have been making on these important areas.
Blake Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in Mid-Bedfordshire want politicians to work cross-party to improve SEND education. Is the Secretary of State committed to working cross-party? And if so, what steps is she taking to do that?
Mr. Speaker, I would love to do that, but I think sadly what we've heard this afternoon from the party opposite demonstrates the challenge that we as a government face in engaging seriously on these big and deep questions, where we will always engage with members of Parliament from across the House as we bring forward these reforms. But I'd suggest he goes and speaks to his honourable friend and asks them to get serious about making change happen.
Mr. Speaker, NSPCC revealed that in 22-23 some 9,000 child sexual abuse offences were recorded by police that involved an online element. Can I ask the Minister this question? What has been done in the schools to improve safety for for children to go online and to ensure whatever changes are made now? Thank you.
I thank my honourable friend for that important question. Strengthening our child protection system is a key priority for this government. We'll be bringing forward plans for the Child Protection Authority very soon. The Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill has a number of measures in it, unfortunately being blocked and frustrated by colleagues in other corners of this House, which would make a big difference to the safety for children across the UK.
Final question, David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is nowhere in the DFE budget that £6 billion could possibly come from, other than the core schools budget. So either the SCN funding is being cut, or the core schools budget is being cut, which implies 5% per head, or she has an explicit agreement with the Chancellor for the money to come from somewhere else or from new taxes. Which is it?
Mr. Speaker, it is not coming from the core schools budget. I could not be more clear. This will come from across government budgets, and it is a matter for the next spending review. And alongside that, it is a matter for the next spending review. It is. And alongside that, we will set out reforms in the new year to improve outcomes for children with SEND, something that he and the party opposite failed to do over 14 years, and they should hang their heads in shame at what they left behind.
We'll now suspend the House till 3:42. The statement arrived late and the front bench needed extra time. Suspended. We now come to the statement. Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to make a statement to the House on two separate but related matters. The first is regarding communication with the public in the lead-up to the budget. I understand that this is a topic which has held much interest and speculation over the weekend, and I would like to take this opportunity to give a formal statement on the Government's position to the House. Second, Mr. Speaker, the Government has also today received the results of the OBR's investigation into the early release of the economic and fiscal outlook at the budget last week. I know the House will be very concerned to know the findings of that report, and so we'll turn to that in a moment. On the first point, Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor has been consistent and upfront with the public about her considerations in the lead-up to the budget last week. First, the Chancellor was clear on her priorities at the budget, which was to cut NHS waiting lists, to cut the cost of living, and to cut our debt and borrowing. The budget that she delivered last week delivered on those priorities. Secondly, the Chancellor was clear on November the 4th that a lower productivity forecast would mean lower tax receipts. The OBR confirmed at the budget that tax receipts are £16 billion lower as a result of their reduced productivity forecast. Third, the Chancellor was clear on November the 4th that she intended to build more headroom. She has done that, with the headroom against the stability rule at £21.7 billion. Fourth, the Chancellor was clear in the summer that the policy decisions we took on welfare would need to be paid for at the budget, and the budget document shows those decisions cost £6.9 billion in 29-30. And finally, the OBR have now confirmed that the Chancellor knew on the 4th of November that she only had £4.2 billion of headroom against the fiscal rules, meaning that once the cost of those policy decisions was accounted for, there would be a deficit of £2.7 billion against the stability rule. Mr. Speaker, the combined effect of this information is that on November the 4th, the Chancellor knew that the government would be in a deficit against the stability rule before any of this government's priorities of the budget had been delivered or any additional headroom built. In light of this information, and in the knowledge of the OBR's productivity downgrade, the Chancellor knew on November the 4th that challenging decisions would be required on tax and spend. The subsequent decision to freeze personal tax thresholds for a further 3 years shows that this was correct. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor took the step of delivering a speech before the budget precisely so that she could be upfront about the circumstances she was facing and the decisions that she would need to take. The Chancellor has been honest and consistent with the public in everything she has said. Now, Mr. Speaker, let me turn to my second topic. Last Wednesday, before the Chancellor had begun to give her budget speech, the Office of Budget Responsibility published their entire economic and fiscal outlook online. Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. This is a very serious breach of highly sensitive information. It is a fundamental breach of the OBR's responsibility. It is a discourtesy to this House, and it should never have happened. The OBR rightly took full responsibility and issued an apology to the Chancellor later that day. They have now conducted an investigation into how the report was published prematurely, and they sent their report, including their findings, to the Treasury and the Treasury Select Committee today at 12:30. The report states, and I quote, "We are in no doubt that the failure to protect information prior to publication has inflicted heavy damage on the OBR's reputation. It is the worst failure in the 15-year history of the OBR." It adds that the responsibility for the circumstances in which this vulnerability occurred and was then exposed rests over the years with the leadership of the OBR. The report notes that this has inflicted heavy damage on the OBR's reputation and caused significant disruption on budget day to the Chancellor's disadvantage. I can confirm to the House that the report goes on to make clear that this is a significant and long-standing issue that has allowed external users to gain early access to the OBR's publication, which contains full details of their forecasts and the Chancellor's budget. Mr. Speaker, in the days since the budget, there has been speculation about what kind of error led to the economic and fiscal outlook being published early. The report today confirms that the cause was not, and I quote, simply a matter of pressing the publication button on a locally managed website too early. The report concludes that the cause of the OBR's error were systemic issues, and that the investigation has made clear that the problem exposed last week was not a new one. Indeed, I can confirm to the House that the report reveals that the OBR's EFO in March was accessed before the Chancellor delivered the spring statement to the House. This underlines just how serious a situation this is. Let me underline that as a government, we take this seriously to make sure the OBR never allows this to happen again. The report notes that common and fairly basic protections to prevent early access, including passwords and random character URLs, were not used. It further notes 2 configuration errors, which were not understood by the OBR's online publishing function, prevented the safeguards within their online publishing software from being effective. Mr. Speaker, I'm also very concerned to share that the report notes, and I quote again, "It is very likely that the weaknesses that caused the premature access of the November 2025 Economic and Fiscal Outlook were pre-existing. Indeed, it appears that the March 2025 Economic and Fiscal Outlook was accessed prematurely." Mr. Speaker, these findings are very serious indeed. That market-sensitive information should have information should have been prematurely accessible to a small group of market participants is extremely concerning. That it might have been the case on more than one occasion is even more severe. We do not know at this stage the extent to which market behaviour may have been affected on this or other occasions as a result of information being available early. But I do want to share one further bit of information from the report with the House today. On the morning of the budget, the first IP address to successfully access the EFO had made 32 prior attempts that day, starting at around 5 a.m. Such a volume of requests implies that the person attempting to access the document had every confidence that persistence would lead to success at some point. And this unfortunately leads us to consider whether the reason they tried so persistently to access the EFO is because they had been successful at a previous fiscal event. At this time, Mr. Speaker, we do not have the answers to all these questions, but I can confirm the Treasury will be making contact with previous Chancellors to make them aware of the developments that relate to previous fiscal events. The OBR have rightly conducted their internal investigation as quickly as possible, and it is right that both the Government and the Treasury Select Committee now take time to consider the report and its findings. The Treasury Select Committee will have the opportunity to carefully question the OBR tomorrow at their post-budget hearing. Furthermore, in response to the recommendation in paragraph 3.4 of the report that the problem exposed last week was not a new one, I can confirm to the House that the Government will be working in conjunction with the National Cyber Security Centre to take forward the recommendation that a forensic examination of other fiscal events is carried out, although let me specifically note for the House that the report finds no evidence of hostile cyber activity. In addition, the report says that they could not, in the time available, carry out a deeper forensic examination of other recent economic and fiscal outlook events, and we recommend that such an exercise is, with expert support, now urgently carried out. Mr. Speaker, we will make sure that work is carried out urgently. We will look at wider questions of the systemic risk that this incident has uncovered, including the report's conclusion that the OBR's information security arrangements should have been regularly re-examined and assured by the management of the OBR. This Government is committed to the independence of the OBR and its role at the heart of economic and fiscal policy making. The Chancellor and the whole of the Treasury value the independence of the OBR, and we have valued the constructive relationship we have had with them over the past 16 months in challenging economic times. The strength of that institution is a vital pillar in the Government's economic and fiscal policy making, and we will respond to this matter with the seriousness it demands.
The statement on the OBR forecast, and in light of the press reports on this matter, I should remind the House that the rules and conventions relating to parliamentary language, as the scheme A sets out, unless this discussion is based upon a substantive motion, certain personal criticism, including accusation of lying or deliberately misleading, are not permitted. And I know the House will want to be at its best, and we take this very seriously. I now call the Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I begin, Mr. Speaker, with the matter of the OBR leak report, to say that we will, of course, study that report in detail. But can I also seek the immediate reassurance from the Right Honourable Gentleman that his concluding comment in that regard, and I quote, "We will respond to this matter with the seriousness it demands," will not include scapegoating the OBR to distract from the serious questions surrounding the handling of the budget by the Chancellor, Ministers, the Treasury and Number 10. And so, Mr. Speaker, turning to the other matters the Chief Secretary addressed in his statement, we expect those in positions of power to act with transparency, openness and integrity. But it is increasingly clear that in recent weeks the conduct of people in government fell short of those standards. This is not just my view. Indeed, a member of the Cabinet is quoted in the press today saying, and I quote, "The handling of this budget has been a disaster from start to finish." Mr. Speaker, the impression has been given that there was a concerted attempt to paint an inaccurate picture of the public finances designed to give political cover for policy decisions around increases in taxes and in welfare spending. Mr. Speaker, on the 4th of November, the Chancellor delivered a pre-budget statement in Downing Street. In it, she said that the OBR would be downgrading their productivity forecasts, meaning lower tax receipts. The Chancellor herself says that statement was meant to set the context for the public finances and the need to take difficult decisions on tax. But she failed, and this is the key point that the Right Honourable Gentleman did not address, she failed to mention that the net result of the OBR's review of the economy was in fact an increase in tax revenues, not a black hole. To quote the OBR's budget report, in isolation, the reduction in productivity growth could have lowered revenues by around 16 billion. However, the boost to receipts from higher inflation and changes to the composition of nominal GDP growth more than offset this. The Chief Secretary argues that there was a need to increase headroom, but that was not the justification for tax rises which was given before the budget, although it is effectively an admission that the decision to leave such a small headroom at the last two fiscal events was irresponsible. And it fails to acknowledge that a significant proportion of the increase in taxes was actually used to fund policy decisions on spending, specifically on welfare. Mr. Speaker, on the 14th of November, the media were briefed that income tax rates would not be increased following the improved forecast from the OBR. We now know this was simply false. As I pointed out in my letter to the OBR before the budget, the finalised pre-measures forecast came weeks before this on the 31st of October. Even after the budget, in a Guardian interview, the Chancellor said income tax rises had remained on the table well into November, quote, because we didn't know the size of the downgrade in productivity. That is not true. Since then, on Friday, the OBR took the unprecedented step of publishing their estimates for headroom in each of their pre-measures forecast rounds. As a result, we now know that at no point was there a deficit of the scale suggested to the media. So can I ask the Chief Secretary, why did the Chancellor claim that she did not know the size of the headroom forecast by the OBR in November when their final forecast was submitted on the 31st of October? At what point were the Cabinet informed that the forecast still showed a surplus? And why did the Chancellor suggest that the OBR's review of the economy had led to a significant deterioration in the public finances? We now know that the briefings to the press were not just inappropriate, they were inaccurate. Those briefings can only have come from inside government. So can the Chief Secretary finally give us a clear answer? Was the Chancellor aware of those briefings and did she authorise them, yes or no? Can he commit to a full investigation by both the Permanent Secretary and the Financial Conduct Authority into those briefings? And can he explain why the Chancellor chose to opine repeatedly on the OBR's forecasts before the budget when those forecasts are provided to her in strictest confidence? Mr. Speaker, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister claimed this morning that the OBR's publication on Friday was simply responding to a request from the Select Committee. But the OBR's report on Wednesday said that it planned to write this letter already. So can the Chief Secretary confirm that in fact it was a proactive choice by the OBR to publish that information, clearly suggesting that the OBR were concerned that the record as to who knew what and when would otherwise be less than clear? Mr. Speaker, it is a matter of profound regret that while the Chancellor chose to appear before the media yesterday, she did not see fit to appear here today. The Chancellor's credibility is in tatters, and to the long list of her failings in respect to these matters should be added that of disrespecting this House.
Chief Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I was unclear from the Shadow Chancellor's comments at the beginning of his speech just then whether, like us, he values the role of the OBR in the budget-setting process. We value its independence, we value its integrity, and that is why we take what happened last Wednesday with the utmost seriousness, and we are determined to pursue it. Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Chancellor went on to make a series of other points which I will address, but what he fails to acknowledge is that the productivity downgrade was real. The £16 billion hit to the forecast as a result of productivity downgrade was real. And I wonder why he doesn't want to acknowledge that, Mr. Speaker. Could it be because the productivity downgrade was a result of things his government did over the 14 years that they were in office? Could it be the fact that the productivity downgrade was a result of a review by the OBR of policies including cuts to public investment, the mishandling of Brexit, the record of the previous government? That is perhaps, Mr. Speaker, why he doesn't want to acknowledge that point. But, Mr. Speaker, the productivity downgrade, £16 billion, was real. The need to build headroom was crucial. Those were principles that guided the Chancellor going into the budget, as well as the importance of cutting the cost of living, cutting NHS waiting lists and cutting government borrowing. And, Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Chancellor will remember from when he was in government under the Conservatives that the process with the OBR and the Treasury is an iterative one that runs up until budget day. And when the Chancellor delivered her budget alongside the Economic and Fiscal Outlook, which was published, as we have discussed today, slightly early, that set out the context of the decisions that she took. He raised the question about information security, and he will have received, I'm sure, the letter from the Permanent Secretary to himself sent on November the 25th, which says that as Permanent Secretary, I, in this case the Permanent Secretary, place the utmost weight on budget security and will continue to keep all aspects under review to ensure the integrity of the budget process. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Chancellor asked where the Chancellor is today. I'm very pleased to tell the House that the Chancellor has been at the Wales Investment Summit today, following the announcement yesterday of £1.4 billion of extra investment into Wales, just the latest in £16 billion of new investments announced since the summit was launched.
We come to the Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you.
Members have got to learn you can't run in front of other members when they're speaking. Please, it's really bad on TV and it's not courteous. Dame Meg Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too welcome the fact that the OBR have put this report out so quickly so that it can put its house in order and make sure this must never happen again. But I have been saddened and troubled by the number of leaks, advertent and inadvertent, that have come out during the budget process. So will the Chief Secretary please assure the House that there will be proper discussion in government about how to prevent this? And I only need to point him to the words of the Permanent Secretary at the Treasury to the Treasury Select Committee on the 12th of February this year, where he was very clear that leaks can be market moving and they must not happen. And let's be clear that the DMO was still trading during the process of this budget and selling gilts at a higher price as a result.
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for her comments. And, Mr. Speaker, I can reassure her and you and the whole House that this government takes the budget process and its responsibilities to this House very seriously. And as I mentioned earlier, the Permanent Secretary has made clear that the Treasury puts the utmost weight on budget security. And the Permanent Secretary has made clear in his letter to the Shadow Chancellor that he will continue to keep all aspects under review to ensure the integrity of the budget process.
Daisy Cooper, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the incredibly serious issue of security failings at the OBR, I understand that the Minister says he does not have all of the answers to the questions, but can I ask whether he has either requested or received any advice on whether the attempts to access that information have reached a threshold that might be criminal under the Criminal Justice Act or might reach a civil level under market abuse regulations? Related to that, can I ask the Minister whether there are any other arm's-length bodies, either related to his department or other departments, that might also now need to conduct a similar internal review into their security? Mr. Speaker, the budget process has been a mess. There has been leaks on a level that has never been seen before, huge amounts of flip-flopping that has created uncertainty for households, for the markets, and led to investment being put on hold by businesses. During the pre-budget press conference, the Chancellor talked about a reduction of productivity growth, but failed to mention that tax receipts were higher than expected. Can the government explain why it omitted to communicate that information? Mr. Speaker, in Sweden, following its own budget crisis in the early 90s, that government changed to a system where the Swedish Parliament saw a draft budget, it debated it at length, and opposition parties could propose alternatives and amendments. Has the government given any consideration at all to introducing a better system? Mr. Speaker, on the issue of omissions, ministers will be aware that on a number of occasions over the last year, ministers have repeated the claim that they would introduce permanently lower business rates for businesses in this country, but they failed to omit that business rates bills would go up because of the higher valuations. Pubs are now saying that the average pub increase will be £12,000 a year, or 76% over the next 3 years. Why did the government omit to mention this?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would refer the Honourable Lady to the comments I made in my earlier speech about how we're going to take forward the recommendations in this report, because, as I made very clear, this is an incredibly serious incident. We take it incredibly seriously, and we're going to move urgently to take forward those recommendations in that report. She asks about other arm's-length bodies or other government organisations, and we take security, information security, cyber security, incredibly serious right across government, and that was the focus of the spending review to ensure that all departments and all bodies of government are adequately resourced to ensure they have the right information technology, the right cyber security, the right information security for the future. The Honourable Lady also referred to the Chancellor's speech on November the 4th, and what the Chancellor set out there was the challenges that we're facing and the principles that would guide her going into the budget. The principles being cutting NHS waiting lists, cutting the cost of living and cutting government borrowing, and that is exactly what she delivered in her budget last week. And on the point of business rates, Mr. Speaker, although I suspect that's a debate for another day rather than this statement, I would point at anyone concerned about increases in their valuations towards the generous transitional relief which will cap the increase in bills at 15% or less for most small businesses next year.
Luke Murphy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having spent the past 18 months arguing that this government has mismanaged the public finances, the benches opposite have now come to the House to argue that the public finances were fine after all. Their position is patently absurd. Due to the productivity downgrade of the OBR, which was a direct result of the benches opposite's decisions, the headroom available to the government had been cut by 57%. So does the Minister agree that the benches opposite are right to be angry about the state of the public finances, and the reason they are on those benches is because they are responsible for that state, and the Chancellor is on our benches making decisions in the national interest?
I brought you in to actually ask a short question, not for a full-blown statement. So please, don't test the church too often too quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend very much for his intervention. He's absolutely right to draw attention to the fact that the party opposite want to completely distance themselves from their record in government, and we have seen their record in government laid bare through the OBR's productivity downgrade, which hit the public finances to the tune of £16 billion as a result of the investigation by the OBR. That is a real consequence on our economy and meant we had to take real decisions to correct it.
Mr. Speaker, you described the chaos and leaks in the run-up to the budget as a hokey-cokey. And just today, the House had to be suspended because the statement arrived so late on a budget delivered so early the Chancellor hadn't actually given it. All a few hours after the Prime Minister had to do a second launch to try and explain it, a day after the Chancellor toured the studios trying to say she didn't mislead people over it. Wouldn't it have been clearer just to say he was hiking tax in order to put up welfare?
Mr. Speaker, what is clear is that we delivered a budget to cut the cost of living, cut NHS waiting lists and cut government borrowing.
Jim Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Isn't it really the case that after 14 years of the party opposite telling the country that politics can't make positive change, that this government has delivered an answer on the two-child limit, answers on things like apprenticeship, and answers things like the future economy and decent public services. And that's why the response is as it seems. But listen, this has not covered the OBR in glory whatsoever. And I hear from the front bench that there is confidence in the OBR and there is a faith in the role that it has to play in the future. But surely this is the moment to say it's on its last warning.
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. And, you know, he's right to point out that we believe the OBR plays a critical role in the budget process. The OBR plays an important role in the robust and transparent fiscal framework that underpins our approach in government. And indeed, the first bill passed by this government included the fiscal lock, which prevents the sidelining of the OBR, which the previous government did and which caused such chaos for people across this country.
Forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the leak of the Office for Budget Responsibility, Economic and Financial Forecasts on Wednesday was obviously shocking, and they have rightly come up with a very swift and complete report as to how that happened. The partial information and the leaks from the Treasury over the many months in the run-up to the budget were, in my opinion, equally shocking. And they caused real-life choices to be made in this economy, and they have dampened confidence in this economy. So will the Chief Secretary commit to an equally thorough and equally rapid leak report presented to this House?
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier in this statement, the government takes the budget process and our responsibilities to this House very seriously. And as she's also aware, the Permanent Secretary has committed to keeping all aspects under review to ensure the integrity of the budget process.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Chief Secretary for his statement. Given that, as others have said, the economic and fiscal outlook contains highly sensitive information on which billions of pounds can be traded, and that the report, the investigation report, makes clear this was not the first time that confidential information had been released before a fiscal event. Does the Minister agree that alongside the National Cyber Security Agency that there might be a role for the National Crime Agency to look at whether something untoward has taken place?
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and as I set out in my remarks earlier, we will be taking forward the recommendations of the report. In particular, we'll be working with, as he referenced, the National Cyber Security Centre to take forward the recommendation of a forensic examination of other fiscal events, because the truth is, Mr. Speaker, it has come to light because of the early publication of the EFO last week. We know through the initial analysis of the OBR that this happened in March. We don't yet know if that happened at previous fiscal events, including for previous Chancellors.
How about?
Speaker, the detail whether the Treasury was dealing with a fiscal black hole or a fiscal lack of headroom will be rather lost on most of my Bath constituents. But will he not agree that the weeks and weeks of speculation leading up to the budget were very damaging, particularly to businesses, and his department could have done more to avoid that?
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I recognise that there was a lot of speculation in the media in the run-up to the budget, but from the government's point of view, the Chancellor took a decision on the 4th of November to set out what her priorities were and what the challenges were going into that budget. We set out the context around the productivity downgrade, set out the importance of building fiscal headroom, and we set out the importance of cutting NHS waiting lists, cutting the cost of living, and cutting government borrowing.
Antonia Banks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure my right honourable friend will agree with me that it is very, very worrying to hear about the repeated attempts to access the statement before it was given. And I wonder if the benches opposite might be a little more concerned, given it may have affected them. But does my right honourable friend agree that if a government left itself with only £4 billion worth of headroom, it would be taking unacceptable risks with the UK's fiscal stability?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. And imagine, Mr. Speaker, if I were in this House trying to defend a budget delivered with just a few £1 billion of headroom. What on earth message would that send about the UK economy? That headroom is there to reduce the cost of government borrowing and to give us protection against future shocks that might come our way.
John Glenn.
Mr. Speaker, on the matter of the process failure of the premature publishing of the document, I think there will be a consensus across the House over this is damaging to the UK's reputation, the reputation of the OBR and to the Treasury. And I welcome that the report says There are issues for the Cabinet Office, the Treasury and the OBR around how documents are hosted. But on the matter of the substantive issue of what the OBR had told the Treasury, the net overall effect of what the OBR had told the Treasury, there can be no doubt. There may be a dispute over whether 4.2 billion was sufficient or not, but we do know for one thing for certain, that they did not say there was a significant black hole that required 2p increase in income tax, which was the consequence of the Chancellor's press conference. Does the Chief Secretary not agree that the material distinction between those two issues mustn't be lost? And he must also face up to the reality of the overall net effect and what impression that left.
Chief Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the Right Honourable Gentleman is a former Treasury Minister himself, and so he will know the importance of the OBR's productivity downgrade and the impact that that has had on the forecasts going into the future. He will know that £16 billion is a significant downgrade to have as a result of that productivity review, and he will know, Mr. Speaker, that were I here defending a budget with just a few £1 billion of headroom, that would not be a position any of us would want to be in.
Gardner.
The Chief Secretary quoted the OBR review, which said the ultimate responsibility for the circumstances in which this vulnerability occurred was with the leadership of the OBR. Has anyone in the OBR leadership offered their resignation, or has that gone out of fashion?
Chief Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that would be a matter for the leadership of the OBR, but let me emphasise how important the OBR is as an institution for this government in providing a robust and transparent fiscal framework that underpins the stability that we have returned to the economy.
Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago from that dispatch box, the Minister said with a straight face to myself that he would not take lessons on credibility. I understand the error of my ways now. I should have given those lessons to the Chancellor, because since then we have seen that she has not been entirely truthful with the public. Indeed, as one of my constituents said to me travelling down from Aberdeen today, that she'd lied to the public. But while she was doing that, they're fearing for their jobs through their punitive EPL. Indeed, 100 more jobs are being lost at Harbour Energy as a result of his policies. Why is it okay for them to lose their jobs, yet she keeps hers?
I think he means the Chancellor. Please.
Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman was talking about the energy profits levy, and let me be clear that we know that oil and gas has a role to play in our energy mix for many years to come. We want to support that industry whilst we also make the transition to clean power, and that's the role that the energy profits levy will play. And we have set out at the budget how the energy profits levy will come to an end in 2030 or sooner if the price floor is triggered.
Holly Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My right honourable friend will acknowledge, as he already has done, the importance of stability for families and businesses across this country, and how, therefore, what we've been calling the fiscal headroom, but frankly is money for a rainy day, is fundamental to being able to maintain that stability, something that was a failure of the government opposite for some time. So would he also acknowledge the importance of the way that the bond markets responded positively to that budget for exactly the reason that we know that delivers us the stability that we all need?
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question, and whilst the government doesn't comment on movements in the bond market, it was very important to us to create that extra headroom in order to bring down the cost of government borrowing and to make sure that we have that buffer for the future.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I've been here a few years and I've seen the run to different budgets. But I have to say, in line with the chairman of the Treasury Select Committee, this has been utterly chaotic and appallingly dangerous. The reality here is that the right honourable gentleman said that there was plenty of speculation in the media. It wasn't speculation, it was informed statements by the media of what they had been briefed from the government. Knowing full well now the damage that has done to our reputation, and also the unprecedented requirement of the OBR then to publish its advice to the government, demonstrates the damage they have done. Will the right honourable gentleman come to the dispatch box in all decency and say the government apologises for the mess that they have made.
Mr. Speaker, I will come to the dispatch box and say that this government takes the budget process and its responsibilities to this House incredibly seriously, and as the Permanent Secretary has set out, he places the utmost weight on budget security. And as I have said to several of the right honourable members, honourable friends, the Permanent Secretary will continue to keep all aspects under review to ensure the integrity of the budget process.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that some of the real-world and market impacts that we saw last week underscore the importance of following proper process with the OBR, and that we saw the evidence of the contrary of that just 3 years ago when the government chose to ignore and bypass it entirely, causing interest rates and mortgage costs to soar?
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for drawing a comparison between the way in which we as a government interact with the OBR and the way that the Liz Truss government interacted with the OBR, because we value the independence of the OBR and we value the constructive relationship that we've had with the OBR over the past 16 months, in stark contrast to previous government sidelined the OBR and caused economic chaos for families across the country.
Sir Julian Lewis.
The government won't apologise for this sorry and tangled affair, but will it at least learn a couple of lessons, such as the fact that there have always been very good reasons for observing total secrecy until budget day, and secondly, when you're not in a financial black hole, don't start digging yourself into one.
Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as the budget documents and as the EFO makes clear, the downgrade in productivity was real. That was a £16 billion hit to economic forecasts. That was a challenge which we inherited as a result of what his government did when they were in power, and we took the right and necessary decisions to fix the public finances and to make sure we could do so without going down the route of uncontrolled borrowing like his government did, or down the route of slashing public investment.
Paul Wall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You were rightly furious last week when this OBR report was prematurely leaked to the public and also to the markets. But it's clear from this report, this independent report, this was an accident waiting to happen due to pre-existing cybersecurity failures. Pre-existing failures that we may well have laid open previous budgets to this kind of access, which should concern the party opposite as much as any other party. This is about the integrity of the OBR. Now, the non-executive directors of the OBR, Baroness Hogg, who's totally independent, and Dame Susan Rice, both conclude ultimate responsibility rests with the leadership of the OBR. I wouldn't expect the Chief Secretary to say whether he's got confidence in the chair of the OBR, but isn't it clear that those non-executive directors clearly lack that confidence in the chair of the OBR?
Chief Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's clear that this is a very serious matter, and it's right that the government responds to it with the seriousness that it demands, because as my honourable friend made clear, this is not, and I quote the OBR again, simply a matter of pressing the wrong button on a locally managed website too early. This is a systemic issue and a far more serious one that deserves our serious attention.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Under the last Conservative government, we saw years of chaos, incompetence, mismanagement, and very often a lack of transparency and honesty with the British public. The government promised change and had a responsibility to deliver a clean break with the Conservatives' approach to government. Will the Minister acknowledge the damage that's been done to those efforts? And what steps will the government take to rectify it?
Chief Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the honourable gentleman that one of the reasons why we take this matter so seriously is precisely because of the value that we place on the OBR. We see the OBR as having a vital role in a robust and transparent fiscal framework, and that is why we take this breach of information last week so very seriously.
Jenko.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's really concerning that these leaks had happened before. Could the OBR tell, the investigation I understand is still underway, who was trying to access it, and can my right honourable friend confirm that this will be investigated fully? Can my right honourable friend also confirm when there was last headroom as low as £4 billion?
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question, and she asks the question around what the OBR report was able to conclude. And indeed, in the report, they said that in the time available, they were not able to carry out a deeper forensic examination of other recent economic and fiscal outlook events. They recommended that such an exercise is urgently carried out with expert support, and that is exactly what the government will be doing.
Simon Hoare.
Mr. Speaker, events such as these do allow ministers and the wider government to reflect on current circumstances. I think that should be recognised. I'm not seeking to scapegoat the OBR, but they're not the Messiah. Sometimes they can be a very naughty boy. They do have to revise their predictions at all times. Now, it may be too traditional to suggest to this government that the Treasury should actually be the Office of Budget Responsibility, and there are good brains in the bank that can be tapped into. Is now not a good opportunity to actually reflect what advice government needs, whether the OBR is fit for purpose, and whether it should be disbanded?
Well, I have a great deal of personal respect for the right honourable gentleman, but I have to say I take a different view than he implies that he takes in respect of the OBR, because we value the role of the OBR. We value the role of the OBR in a robust and transparent fiscal framework, and it is precisely because we value that role that we take this breach of information last week so seriously.
Rachel Musk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To bring this ensuing debate to a conclusion of who knew what when, does my right honourable friend agree that he should publish a detailed timetable of the economic information that the Chancellor was in receipt of, including the return on tax receipts and the impact on wage growth?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as my honourable friend will know, the OBR has already published its forecast at various rounds during the budget process. The process is iterative between the Treasury and the Office of Budget Responsibility. And at the budget, I'm sure my honourable friend will welcome the fact that we cut the cost of living, cut NHS waiting lists and cut government borrowing.
Samuel Wilson.
Mr. Speaker, the government's had a lucky break today in that the OBR's confession and report on its leak of the budget details has coincided with this meeting today. It's given the Minister the opportunity to deflect and use a shield, the shield of the OBR, to deflect from the real criticism which should lie with the Chancellor, who weeks before was using selective information, distorting the forecasts to cover up for the fact that she was taking money from those who work to pay those who don't work. And is that not the real shame of what we're discussing today?
Chief Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the real focus of the Chancellor has been on cutting the cost of living, cutting NHS waiting lists and cutting government borrowing. And I hope that the honourable gentleman would, like all members of this House, value the importance of the Office of Budget Responsibility and take this matter with the same seriousness that we in government do.
David Pinto-Tuchinski.
Mr. Speaker, I, like many members of this House, have been shocked by the early release of the OBR's EFO report. This kind of error risks compromising the integrity of the budget process and moving markets. That evidence has now emerged that this was not the first time that the OBR forecast was accessed prematurely due to systematic failures in the OBR's own cybersecurity is simply unforgivable. Given this appalling failure that the chair of the OBR himself acknowledges is the worst failure in the organisation's history, can the Minister tell this House what he thinks it would take for the chair of the OBR to resign?
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. And obviously, the questions about what the leadership of the OBR do are for the leadership of the OBR. But I can tell him that this government takes the information breach last week incredibly seriously. And the fact that it wasn't simply a wrong button being pressed on a locally managed website, the fact that it was a systemic issue, the fact that it had happened before, at least one time in March of this year, and who knows whether it had happened at previous events, underscores just how serious a matter and just what a failing it represents.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We know the Chief Secretary is a very thoughtful, intelligent man, and he will know that the press were being briefed extensively about what the budget was going to say. They weren't making it up. Where does the Chief Secretary believe that briefing was coming from? Does he believe it was coming from special advisers? Does he believe it was coming from Treasury officials? Does he believe it was coming from Number 10? Or does he think the Christmas elf had taken a hand in all of this?
Chief Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that journalists from all publications need no encouragement to speculate on the contents of the budget. And I would draw his attention to my previous remarks that this government takes the budget process and our responsibility to this House very seriously.
Serena Bratton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, like other members across this House, I hope, are deeply concerned and shocked that the OBR have leaked not just the autumn budget, but also previous fiscal events. Hugely concerning. Does my right honourable friend agree that the Chancellor's decision to more than double fiscal headroom has been welcomed by markets and will strengthen UK resilience?
Chief Secretary.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to draw attention to the fact that not only doubling the headroom but getting it to £21.7 billion is a crucial step in strengthening the resilience of the UK economy and the public finances, helping to bring down government borrowing and protect us from future shocks.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm concerned that the Minister today in this House has misled inadvertently the House on 3 separate occasions, as the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the British people this morning. Cutting borrowing is simply not the case. The OBR's numbers show clearly that over the next 5 years, government borrowings increased by a net £504 billion, an additional £60 billion from the OBR forecast back in March. He can't even claim that it's as a percentage of net debt, because all of those numbers are increasing. So will the Minister please correct the record?
Chief Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, borrowing falls in every year of this forecast. Thank you.
Chris Vins.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry, I was shocked to be picked so early, but I appreciate it. Thank you. I thank my right honourable friend for his statement. The OBR report being published prematurely is very disappointing. And I think, to be fair, members across the House can agree from that. Why it's particularly disappointing for me and for residents in Harlow is actually it detracts from a budget that makes a real difference to families in my constituency. Freezing rail fares, freezing prescription charges, lowering waiting times for the NHS, and, as you know, I'm particularly concerned about actually tackling tax evasion.
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and not only is he an excellent advocate for tackling tax avoidance and evasion, but he's also absolutely right to point to the fact that what is important for people across this country is that this budget cuts the cost of living, cuts NHS waiting lists and cuts government borrowing.
Any more?
It's deeply damaging and, dare I say, unprecedented that we find ourselves here today listening to this statement about OBR forecasts midway through the debate on the budget. It raises more questions, not least that the Chancellor chose not to be here today to answer those questions. Why?
I don't know, Mr. Speaker, if the Right Honourable lady missed my explanation earlier of where the Chancellor was, but I'm pleased to announce to the House that the Chancellor is in Wales today at the Wales Investment Summit. And she is there following an announcement yesterday of £1.4 billion of extra investment into Wales. And that is just the latest of £16 billion of new investment announced since the summit was launched.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Chief Secretary for his statement. The integrity of fiscal forecasting not only depends on the technical expertise, but on the public confidence in those people who are delivering them. And clearly that confidence has been shaken in the past few days. So can the Chief Secretary outline what governance changes he and the department are thinking to enact so that those overseeing the fiscal process meet the highest standards of conduct and scrutiny? And does he have confidence in the head of the OBR in delivering them?
Chief Secretary.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I would emphasise to him and to all members of this House that the Chancellor and all of us in the Treasury value the independence of the OBR, and we value the constructive relationship we've had with them over the past 16 months in challenging times. Obviously, the matter which we're discussing today, the early publication of that report last Wednesday, is an incredibly serious matter. And the reason why we as a government are taking it so seriously is because we want to preserve the integrity and independence of the OBR in the future.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
I'm very interested to learn that the Chancellor is in Wales today. Amidst all this message manipulation, she leaves him to explain exactly why the continued freeze on income tax thresholds will hit Wales badly, with an estimated 5 times more Welsh workers pulled into the basic rate compared with the UK as a whole. And I can only presume the Treasury consulted with Labour Welsh Government. Will he release their response specifically in relation to confidence and cost of living hit?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sorry the Right Honourable Lady does not welcome the fact that the Chancellor is in Wales today promoting investment in Wales, but I can point her to the fact that the decision to lift the 2-child benefit cap will benefit children in Wales, that the money off energy bills will benefit people in Wales, changes to the fiscal framework will benefit people in Wales, that the decisions we took in this government cut the cost of living and make sure we cut government borrowing, which will benefit people right across the UK.
Lawrence Turner.
Madam, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The OBR is a valuable institution, and the Economic and Fiscal Outlook is by far the most important document that it produces. Today's report makes it clear that the OBR's IT infrastructure was a point of critical failure that should have been identified as far back as 2013.
Absolutely.
Does he agree that the chair of the OBR now cannot credibly lead the investigatory and reconstruction work, and that he should resign?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I understand events are moving quickly, and I understand from messages passed to me there has been an event, the chair of the OBR has resigned, is what I understand from messages passed to me.
Dr. Luke Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And through the morass of the leaks, one thing is crystal clear. This Labour government broke its manifesto commitment. The Chancellor said, I am asking everyone to make a contribution, then went round the studios on the weekend asking ordinary people to pay a little bit more. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, she is not asking, she is telling the public. So will the Minister come to the dispatch box, and if my constituents say they are not paying those taxes, they will not face any criminal or financial repercussions?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor was clear that in taking the decisions that we took at the budget last week when it comes to taxation, we were taking the fair and necessary decisions to make sure everyone makes a contribution, but that the contribution of working people is kept as low as possible thanks to the other choices we have made, increasing tax on property income, increasing tax on properties worth more than £2 million, reforming gambling taxation. All of that means that we can keep taxes on working people as low as possible.
Andrew Pates.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the leak of the OBR report makes deeply worrying reading, so I welcome the resignation of the chair of the OBR because leadership matters on these issues. It turns out that the leak was not as unprecedented as we thought last week, as we've seen they have leaked earlier documents and they may need to go back further in their look at it. This could have led to speculation and costs running into millions for us. Can my right honourable friend tell us if he knows how many times this has happened before? Does he know when we will know that information, if not? And more importantly, in regards to last week, does he know how many times the OBR's budget report was viewed externally before the Chancellor delivered the budget last week?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he's right to draw attention to the seriousness of what happened last week. The initial report by the OBR sets out just how many times it was accessed and shared before the Chancellor had given her budget speech. There were 32 attempts to access it, starting around 5 a.m. That day. It was then shared multiple times before the Chancellor had delivered her budget speech. We don't have all of the answers to the questions that he asked, and the OBR acknowledged that in the limited time they had available, they've not done the forensic analysis of what happened at all previous fiscal events. We know that it was certainly accessed in the March 25 Spring Statement EFO, but what we will do as a government is work to make sure we have full information and urgently find out what was shared, or what was inadvertently shared rather, at previous fiscal events.
Dr. Ellie Chowns. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've had plenty of disagreement today, but I think it's clear there is also consensus that truth and accountability matter. And so I would like to draw the House's attention to the campaign by Compassion in Politics for a targeted legal measure that would make it an offence for any politician or candidate to deliberately mislead the public on a matter of verifiable fact. This is now being taken forward in Wales. It has long-standing cross-party support in this House. Will the government support those of us who are campaigning for a political truthfulness bill in order to rebuild trust in politics?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government takes the role of the independent advisor on standards incredibly seriously and abides by his rulings. We know what damage the previous government did to trust in politics, and whilst it would be foolish to suggest that no government at any point in the future will ever face difficulties, it is how you respond to those difficulties which matters. And this government has shown that we respond in a way that is transparent, fair, and brings an end to any sense that people have behaved improperly.
Peter Swallow.
Madam Deputy Speaker. On the 3rd of September, the Shadow Chancellor stood at that dispatch box and claimed that the hole in the public finances could be as much as £40 billion. Now, as it happens, that was not the case, not least because of the Chancellor's steadfast commitment to stabilising our economy. But does my right honourable friend not agree? It's a bit rich for the party opposite to go around claiming that people are talking down the economy and talking up the gap in our public finances, when the only people doing that are them.
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is right, and I don't hold out any hope that the party opposite will speak with any consistency or that they will do anything other than try and talk down the British economy. And in stark contrast, we are cutting government borrowing, we are increasing the headroom, we are making sure we have stable public finances and stable economy, because it is on that basis we can boost investment and growth.
Sir John Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The demeanour of the Chancellor should be somewhere between an undertaker and an oncologist. A reassuring presence and no words wasted. Not a party entertainer trying a few tricks before they go on stage, which is what this Chancellor did before the budget. So in seizing back control from the OBR, unaccountable, unelected, and should have never been set up in the first place, will the Minister recognise that unless the Treasury and ministers are straight with the public, no one will be trusted?
Look, I think the right honourable gentleman and I disagree clearly about the role of the OBR, because we value its role in a transparent and robust fiscal framework. And may I say, Madam Deputy Speaker, because during this debate Richard Hughes has offered his resignation, and may I put on record on behalf of the government our thanks to Richard Hughes for his dedication to public service.
Glyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It strikes me that much of the criticism from benches opposites is rooted in the decision to increase funds to raise the headroom. Now, I know at the moment. I wonder if the honourable gentleman could advise me what the likely would have been.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to draw attention to the fact that had I been here today defending a headroom of £4 billion or less, it would be a completely impossible task. And this government is determined to ensure that we increase headroom to give us greater stability. And by increasing it to £21.7 billion, we have done just that.
Terrible.
Really takes the integrity of the budget as seriously as the Chief Secretary says, then she would not have leaked so much to the media before. There's speculation and then there's being spoon-fed. And the only principles actually guiding the Chancellor was keeping her backbenchers happy, and the only cuts were to confidence. So, can the Chief Secretary set out exactly what steps will the Chancellor take to clear up this mess? Will she come back before this House, and will she refer herself to the FCA?
Minister.
I don't quite understand the honourable lady's question, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor, when we got into office in July last year, our task was to fix the mess that they had left of the public finances. And at this budget, the OBR's productivity downgrade revealed a further damage, deep scars that her government's actions had caused on our economy as a result of the slashing of public investment and the mishandling of Brexit. So if anyone wants to come to this chamber and apologise, might it be her?
Steve Race, are you ready this time?
I'm ready, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much. Can I first express my concern about the outcomes of the budget, the leak report, which are completely unacceptable and apparently, especially because they're apparently so systemic. Now, the OBR productivity downgrade reduced revenues by 16 billion. Why does my right honourable friend think productivity growth has, since 2010, so consistently underperformed forecasts, and indeed other countries too?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for this question about the OBR productivity downgrade, which clearly has played a really important and difficult role in this budget process. And what the OBR's review of productivity made clear is that under the previous government, the decision to cut public services, to cut public investment, the mishandling of Brexit has had deep scars on our economy. And those are deep scars that we had to take decisions at this budget to correct.
Sarah Dyke. Madam Deputy Speaker, at last year's autumn budget, the Chancellor claimed that 75% of farms will be unaffected by the APR and BPR, a figure that has been widely disputed. This year, there's yet more confusion over the figures, with the Chancellor implying public finances were significantly worse than the OBR assessment suggested. So after years of being ignored and taken for granted by the Conservatives, how can rural businesses have confidence in this government's economic strategy of key figures that are inaccurate or misrepresented?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've taken part in a number of debates in this House and in Westminster Hall to debate the changes to agricultural property relief and business property relief that the government introduced at the budget last year. We've debated the figures extensively. Some of the difference in people's figures stems from the fact that we are talking about estates, which is the right measure when you're talking about inheritance tax rather than the values of farms themselves. But I also hope that the Honourable Lady would have seen the change that we made to the system at this budget through the spousal transfer.
Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the Chief Secretary will know, the Ministerial Code requires ministers to be as open as possible with Parliament and the public. So exactly when did the Chief Secretary learn that the Chancellor did not face the shortfall that the Treasury was briefing to the press?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as a Treasury Minister, I've obviously been involved in discussions with the Chancellor and with the Prime Minister's team throughout the budget process, because we developed these policies collectively to cut the cost of living, cut NHS waiting lists and cut government borrowing.
Graham Ledbetter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister said this morning that politics is about choices. The Chancellor chose not to disclose the improved tax outlook from the OBR when she addressed the country on the 4th of November. The Chancellor chose to overstate the challenges with public finances. The Chancellor chose to withhold more positive forecasts from her Cabinet colleagues. The Chancellor chose not to be here today to answer questions on her conduct in office. Does the Minister agree that her position is untenable and that she should now choose to resign?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor chose on November the 4th to be upfront with people about the challenges we face. And at the budget, she chose to cut the cost of living, cut the NHS waiting list and cut government borrowing.
Dr. Kira Mullen.
Thank you. Let's start in saying one of the few people in the chamber who apparently isn't shocked at what's been going on this week. What I'm not shocked about is that a Labour Cabinet member, and I quote, has said that the handling of this budget has been a disaster from start to finish. Can the Chief Secretary tell us which Labour Cabinet member said this, and can they have a bigger role in the next budget?
Can the honourable gentleman tell us why he backed Liz Truss for leader?
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor announced that her plans aims to fund public services, avoid austerity, invest for the future, portraying a positive future, but also spending that seems manageable, whilst the OBR forecasted if borrowing increases in the short term, this could have a potential impact on future spending in terms of welfare and debt interest, which could erode the economy. What steps will the Treasury take after budget plans to ensure that through her plans we are not sacrificing long-term stability? Thank you.
Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question, and long-term stability is at the heart of the fiscal rules which the Chancellor introduced at the budget last year, which have been met at the spring statement earlier this year and have been met again at the budget last week. And as many honourable members have raised today, the fact that we are meeting those fiscal rules with a far greater headroom of £21.7 billion in the current budget balance gives us that greater stability, helps bring down the cost of government borrowing and protects us from future shocks.
John Lamont.
you very much. Andy Haldane, former Bank of England chief economist, said the government's repeated mistakes and misinformation about the public finances have sucked all the life or energy from the economy. Chief Secretary, the former chief economist is correct, isn't he?
Yeah. Yes.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as we set out at the budget, not only were we setting out to cut the cost of living, cut NHS waiting lists and cut government borrowing, but we were also focusing on growth through the public investment which we set out, the public investment in transport, in energy, in roads, in railways, in all the infrastructure the businesses need to do their investment to boost jobs and growth across the country. We invested in every part of the country with a focus on Wilfer in Wales, Grangemouth in Scotland, the Oxford-Cambridge corridor, the Northern Growth Corridor, because we know that growth has to happen right across the country to benefit people in every part of the UK.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's been too much obfuscation today between what the Office of Budget Responsibility did in leaking it early and that the Office of Budget Responsibility told the Chancellor before she made her statements about there not being the fiscal black hole that she went out to make. Madam Deputy Speaker, they were leaks to the press. Mr. Speaker stood in that chair and admonished the government for leaking. It was not speculation in the press. This has been nothing but jackanori. So how does this government start to rebuild trust with the public when it simply is trying to do smoke and mirrors and not face up to the fact that they kept leaking to the press?
Minister.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't know if the honourable gentleman heard what I said earlier when I underscored how importantly ministers in this government take the budget process and how important we take our responsibility to this House. And I referred earlier to the words of the Permanent Secretary of the Treasury about the fact that he will continue to keep all aspects of budget security under review to ensure the integrity of the budget process.
Cross.
Speaker, the forecasts are meant to be to help the government decide what to do. But there is nothing in this forecast of oil and gas revenues which explains why the EPL was kept. £6.2 billion downgrade in the expected revenue from oil and gas to the end of the budget period. A 40% decrease in just a year in what it was bringing in. Production down 55% and 33% for gas and oil over the budget period. None of this is to do with the size of the basin. It's all to do with the fiscal and regulatory regime that this government is imposing on the North Sea. 100 jobs gone today in Harbour Energy. There will be more to come, and every job loss from now is on the back of this government because they've known exactly what the oil and gas sector have been saying to them, because they've been saying exactly the same to me too, but I have chose to listen. Why has the government, on the back of the OBR forecast, decided to keep the EPL when they know the impact it's having on jobs and investment and production and the future of the North Sea?
Well, I can reassure the honourable lady that over the last year since we won the election, I've spent many hours with the oil and gas industry in Aberdeen, and that is exactly why we confirmed in the budget last week that we will end the energy profits levy in 2030 or sooner if the price floor is triggered.
Thank
you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When did the Prime Minister first brief her Cabinet colleagues on the realities of the OBR forecast?
I think the honourable gentleman means Chancellor. Yes, the Chancellor obviously spoke to Cabinet on the day of the budget, as is normal process, to let people know what is coming in the budget later that day.
Stevenson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chief Secretary has failed to answer a critical question raised by my right honourable friend, the Shadow Chancellor, and a similar question was raised by the honourable member for St Albans. So I can ask the question in a slightly different way. Does the Minister agree that the FCA must urgently investigate whether conduct has fallen short, particularly Part 7 of the Financial Services Act 2012 and Article 12(1)(c) of the UK Market Abuse Regulation, and that no stone should be left unturned in that investigation?
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the Chancellor has made clear, she has now delivered her budget. The Office of Budget Responsibility have published their figures, and we have been clear that we were focused on cutting the cost of living, cutting NHS wait lists and cutting government borrowing.
Madam Deputy Speaker, it's been dragged out of the government that there was no black hole of £20 to £30 billion in the run-up to the budget. In fact, there was a surplus. So that means Treasury insiders were deliberately misleading the press, the markets and our constituents in the run-up to the budget, where they intended all along to raise taxes on working people to fund increased welfare. Why is the Minister continuing to take the public, our constituents, for fools?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I can't work out if the honourable gentleman is implying that he thinks a few £1 billion of headroom is acceptable, because certainly as a government, we do not think it is. We think that having £4.2 billion or less headroom is not an acceptable place for our economy to be. And when we had the result of the OBR productivity downgrade, which had hit revenues by £16 billion, that is why decisions were necessary to restore the public finances and to meet our priorities going into the budget.
Dr Neil Shastrihurst.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The British public are by nature a forgiving people. However, does the Chief Secretary to the Treasury not recognise that the obfuscation of the kind that we've seen over the weekend deeply damages public confidence?
Yes. Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I hate to break it to the honourable gentleman, but I doubt the British people will forgive them for Liz Truss's record in office.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. According to the latest House of Commons Library briefing and economic forecasts, the freeze on the income tax threshold is projected to raise over £38 billion per year by 2029-30. For comparison, the Institute for Fiscal Studies estimates that by 2030 the freeze will raise approximately £8 billion annually, which is similar to adding 1 pence to the basic rate of income tax. Will the Minister agree that the Chancellor's statement that she met the manifesto pledge not to raise income taxes she did not meet and she misled the public and this House?
No. The Chancellor...
Order. I believe that the honourable member inadvertently used the word that the Chancellor misled the House without saying she inadvertently misled the House. Noted, but we need to be mindful of our language at all times. Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, at the budget, the decisions the Chancellor took on tax were fair and necessary. Yes, asking everyone to make a contribution, but also taking decisions around increasing property income taxation, about asking people with £2 million plus properties to contribute more, about changing the way that gambling companies are taxed. All of those decisions meant that we were able to keep the tax burden on working people as low as possible.
That is the end of the statement. I will give the front benches a moment to shuffle over. We now come on to the 10-minute rule motion, Iconic Trees and Nature Education. Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision for a register of iconic trees, to make provision about the designation and protection of trees on that register, and to require the Secretary of State to review the provision of nature education in England and for connected purposes. It should hardly be surprising that the Member of Parliament for the Hexham constituency, I'm also often called the Honourable Member for the Sycamore Gap. The summer of 1991 saw many landmarks. It was, first of all, the summer in which I was born. It was also the summer in which Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves was released and where Bryan Adams introduced Sycamore Gap to a transatlantic audience. It's a profound honour to represent a constituency whose identity is forever marked by the legacy of the Sycamore Gap, a reminder of our rich heritage, the strength of our community and our enduring hope. Planted in the late 1800s by the previous landowner John Clayton, the Sycamore Gap stood in an idyllic dip along Hadrian's Wall. Not just visual iconic, became a cultural symbol popularised by the infamous 1991 film, by numerous paintings, photographs and private moments as well. As the film's director Kevin Costner captured, the Sycamore Gap is one of the most quintessentially idyllic spots in the world. I found it so special and I wanted to share with people how special it was. And he is and was most certainly right. The iconic tree touched the lives of so many, not only in the North East but right across the world. A picturesque destination for hikes, for stargazing, a popular sentimental moment for many marriage proposals, family walks and the scattering of loved ones' ashes. It provided an opportunity to connect with over 900 years of heritage in the North East with its situation along Hadrian's Wall. There really is and was no place quite like it. But the legacy of the Sycamore Gap hardly now needs recounting. I know members right across the House can agree that the Sycamore Gap tree was not just a landmark. It was a majestic symbol of resilience, of North East identity and of belonging. It's difficult to put into words the events that took place on the evening of the 27th of September 2023. The felling of the Sycamore Gap tree sent shockwaves not only through the North East but it reverberated right across the world. For many, it felt like an attack, a beloved landmark taken from us overnight, a piece of our shared identity toppled. Communities throughout my constituency and beyond mourn not just a tree, but the memories, the heritage, and the sense of place that it embodied. It illustrated the true fragility of the natural and cultural treasures that we so often take for granted. In one night, a devastating and barbaric act of vandalism toppled a landmark that symbolised North East heritage for centuries. But, Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, if there is one thing to note about the North East spirit, it is its resilience. As a region that's so often overlooked, communities across Northumberland and the North East bound together in solidarity, facing hardship head-on and standing stronger as a result. While grieving for a landmark lost, that resilience translated into lessons learnt. I want to pay tribute, first of all, to the outstanding work of the Northumberland National Park and the National Trust, who've been working tirelessly alongside Historic England and the Hadrian's Wall Partnership to ensure a fitting legacy for both nature and people that can flourish following the terrible act of vandalism. At the Sill, the National Landscape Discovery Centre, the largest section of the felled tree is now on public display. I had the pleasure of visiting this during the unveiling of the exhibition, recognising the lasting connection that the display will offer for future generations. And just this week, Madam Deputy Speaker, saplings taken from the original Sycamore Gap are ready to be planted. As part of the National Trust's Tree of Hope initiative, each sapling will carry a message of hope and resilience. 49 saplings are being distributed right across the country, each sapling representing a foot in the height of the tree at the time of its felling. Now, just this week, a sapling has been planted in the grounds of Hexham Hospital, offering a symbol for those visiting their loved ones. Soon, a sapling will be planted to commemorate the tragic murder of Holly Newton in my constituency and to recognise the phenomenal work of Holly's mother, Michaela Trussler, and her charity Holly's Hope. And I want to once again take this opportunity to put my thanks and my admiration on record for her dedication, her campaigning, and my full support to secure a change in the law. Now, as the closest school to Sycamore Gap, Henshaw Church of England Primary School will plant a sapling on its grounds, as will Northumberland National Park in the new year. Now, I look forward to visiting these sites throughout my constituency to pay tribute, not just to the tree, but to the people and the charities that are inspiring such hope and resilience. The legacy of the Sycamore Gap will not just be reserved for Northumberland and the North East, however. Right across the country and in many constituencies, saplings are being planted. In Staffordshire, a sapling is being planted to commemorate the Mini Pit mining disaster, in Berkshire to honour Greenham Common, and in Leeds to recognise the Rob Burrows Centre for Motor Neurone Disease at Seacroft Hospital. The Sycamore Gap tree's legacy will prevail, and so too shall the lessons of environmental protection triumph. Now, while one of the defendants expressed his delusional disbelief, claiming that it was just a tree, Sycamore Gap was and is so much more than this. Trees are not just trees. Our planet is intrinsically dependent upon them. They are vital to sustaining our planet, cleaning our air, supporting our biodiversity and our ecosystems. They are homes to nature, wildlife, birds and insects. Without them, our planet would falter. But there is a reason why trees so often appear in our culture and our literature, for their symbolic significance. In Greek mythology, the tale of King Erysichthon claimed the felling of a tree represented a moral failure. In the final book of the Chronicles of Narnia, the destruction of trees in the Lantern Waste alludes to the end of the world. And without trees, our heritage would flatline, our ecosystems would fail, and our history would be forgotten. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm calling for a register of iconic trees to be made, from the Ankerwick Yew in Berkshire, associated with the sealing of the Magna Carta, to the major oak in Sherwood Forest, home to Robin Hood, to the Fortingall Yew in Perthshire, to the Crowhurst Yew in the churchyard of St George's Church. The list can go on. Such trees can and should be classified as iconic for holding widely recognised cultural, historical, ecological and symbolic significance. Alongside a register of iconic trees, a curriculum review can and should incorporate the value of understanding the legacy of trees, the role they play in local communities, and allow nature to be an educator for future generations. Teachers and schools have a unique role to play in facilitating children's connections with nature, so they too can understand how to protect our local heritage and engage in climate protection. As Tony Gates, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Park Authority of Northumberland, has said, The felling of the sycamore gap tree has shown just how much nature and landscape mean to people, to their very well-being. We're determined to honour the spirit of Sycamore Gap through opportunities to connect with the tree and to create a legacy for both people and nature. This bill would not be possible without the outstanding work from Northumberland National Park, the National Trust and local organisations and individuals right across my constituency. I want to thank every single person for their dedicated commitment to honouring the legacy of that Sycamore Gap tree. I do hope that any DEFRA minister on the front bench notes the contribution of the Northumberland National Park and looks favourably upon a rethinking of the National Park funding formulas. Though the Sycamore Gap tree has fallen, its legacy stands unshaken, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's our solemn responsibility to honour that legacy, to recognise the hope, the endurance and the unity that it inspired, and to safeguard the iconic trees that shape our national landscape, ensure that they are cherished, protected and never consigned alone to memory.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many that opinion say aye? Aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Michael Wheeler, James Naish, Lawrence Turner, Lee Ingham, David Smith, Dave Robertson, Marcus Campbell-Savers, Ferial Clark and Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Joe Morris. Nice and straight, yeah. Good, good.
Iconic Trees and Nature Education Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 16th of January 2026.
Friday the 16th of January 2026. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
Ways and Means adjourned debate on question.
Now.
The question is as on the order paper, and I call the Secretary of State, Ed Miliband.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it's a privilege to open this budget debate on a theme of paramount importance to our country, the cost of living crisis facing Britain's families. Madam Deputy Speaker, whatever our party, we should take a step back and think about the history of the last 2 decades since the financial crisis, during which we've seen the stagnation of real wages, only this year getting back to their 2008 levels, the worst progress on living standards in the last Parliament since records began in the 1950s, an epidemic of in-work poverty such that, according to the Resolution Foundation, 7 out of 10 families with children who live in poverty now have someone in work, home ownership falling from 2/3 of young people in the early 1990s to less than half today, and the biggest rise in energy bills in generations earlier this decade when Russia invaded Ukraine, on top of public services facing strains as never before. Madam Deputy Speaker, each of these on their own would cause people to doubt whether this country really works for them. Together they represent a perfect storm that makes people question their basic assumptions about our economy, society and our country. This is the condition of Britain question of our time, and it's the backdrop against which this government was elected 17 months ago. And the mission, the driving purpose of this government and this budget is to tackle this crisis. And that starts from an understanding that this crisis is not due to accidental circumstances, but in our view on this side, a governing ideology. And that our response must be to change course in 3 ways. First, that we need to make fair choices which favour ordinary working people, not the rich and powerful, who've been favoured for too long. Second, that we must invest in and rebuild our public services and infrastructure so that we never return to austerity, which was such a disaster for the social and economic fabric on which so many people rely. Third, that we must endeavour to change our economy so it produces more good jobs at good wages that sustain a decent living for people, ending the hollowing out of our economy and our communities. And that's what this government is about. That's what this budget is seeking to deliver. First, then, I want to talk about fair choices. There is an illuminating chart, Madam Deputy Speaker, I love charts, on page 33 of the Budget Red Book, which shows the impact of decisions since the 2024 autumn budget. And it shows the progressive approach of my right honourable friend, the Chancellor. It shows that every decile will be better off as a result of her measures, except the richest 10%, with the greatest gains as a percentage of income to lower and middle income families. Raising the national living wage and the national minimum wage, freezing rail fares for the first time in 30 years, freezing prescription charges, and two measures I want to focus on, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, lifting the two-child limit in universal credit, which goes to the heart of the affordability crisis that so many face. And I think we need to have a debate about this issue. Since the two-child cap was introduced in 2017, this policy, according to a DWP document published on the day of the budget, has put 300,000 children into relative poverty. That's the equivalent, as the document says, of 100 children every single day. More than 3 primary school classes each day being pushed into poverty. I'll give way in a moment, part of a wider picture. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, 7.1 million low-income households, 1 in 4 across the UK, have gone without essentials in the last 6 months, in one of the richest countries in the world. That's why we've acted on the two-child limit. 2 million children helped, and 450,000 fewer children in poverty by the end of the Parliament. Now, as I understand it, and I will give way in a moment, now, as I understand it, the party opposite opposes this policy because they claim it is about helping people out of work who are undeserving. But I think we need to unpack this false claim, Madam Deputy Speaker, because the inescapable fact that they want to run away from is that around 60% of families impacted by this policy are in work, not out of work. People for whom work simply does not pay. Like the case of Shauna and her husband, who have 3 children, a case highlighted by the Child Poverty Action Group. Her husband works full-time, and she says, and I quote, "This will make a big difference because we've had to incur debts. Hopefully it will mean I can cover the last bills that come in each month instead of being in the red. I could buy a new mattress for 2 of my children. They can feel the springs on the mattresses they've had for many years." That is the condition of Britain question. And how does the leader of the opposition describe Shauna and her husband? She calls them Benefit Street. She calls them Benefit Street. People working all the hours God sends, working hard, trying to do the right thing. The very people the party opposite claim to stand up for. How dare she, Madam Deputy Speaker? I give way to the honourable gentleman.
Very grateful for giving way. The point I was going to make is when it comes to making decisions about poverty, it is difficult. So I'd be grateful to understand why the own government's analysis, when he changed the winter fuel payments, put 100,000 people into poverty, into relative poverty, 50,000 immediately into absolute poverty. These are the decisions that he made and his government made because they were concerned about the finances of the country. Suddenly we now come to the same concerns we have on this side with the child benefit cap, and yet we've made a different decision. Could you explain the reasons why there's a difference?
Because in case you hadn't noticed, we changed that policy. And let me just say, let me just say to him, he's going to have to answer to his own constituents because there are 1,500 children in his constituency who will be helped by this, and he is saying, rip that help away. And frankly, let's have the argument about this. So I will in a moment. So on the one hand, we've got 60% of people who are working, and you know, they don't really want to explain why they're cutting the help for them. But let's discuss the 40% of households who aren't working, who are impacted. Look, what we're seeing here, of course, because I'm old enough to remember this, is a rerun of the last Tory government and their attempt to blame the poor for their poverty. But let's even leave that aside, because the truth is what they actually are saying is they believe in punishing the children of people out of work on benefits. Well, he says from the sedentary position that it's absurd. It's not absurd because they're punishing children. I'll give way in a moment. Let me make my point. They're punishing children for having another brother or sister. If you're 2 children, if you've only got 1 sibling, you'll get the full amount. But if you've got 2 siblings, you won't. How is that fair, Madam Deputy Speaker? How is that right? And of course, as the Chancellor said very powerfully in her budget speech, is that good for our economy and society? Of course it isn't. I give way to the honourable lady.
To the right honourable gentleman for giving way. So if his policy is so good, how will he explain to those working people that they're going to be £18,000 worse off than those on benefits. How can that be fair?
Sorry, this is all about working people. As I tried to explain earlier in my speech, 60% of people, 60% of people, if they'll just listen for a sec, 60% of the people who are going to benefit from the families who are going to benefit from this are in work. And look, if she wants to go, Madam Deputy Speaker, to the wider budget strategy of my right honourable friend, I absolutely fully support this budget strategy because it was a fair budget. Yes, it did raise taxes on those with expensive homes, a policy I advocated 10 years ago as a matter of interest. It did raise taxes. It did raise the gambling. It did raise taxes on the gambling companies, and it did raise taxes on landlords. Part of they should read the budget red book. Part of a fair budget. The second policy, and I do think, by the way, that the party opposite is going to have to explain to people up and down the country why they want to leave hundreds of thousands of children in poverty. That is not fair, it's not right, and it's bad for our country. I'm going to make a bit more progress. The second policy I want to focus on is the Chancellor's decision to take £150 of costs off energy bills, something that will be important for families across the country. This has only been possible because of a principled decision made by my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, to shift the cost of some levies into public spending. Itself only possible because of her budget decisions, including raising taxes, I won't for a moment, including raising taxes on the wealthiest, moving 75% of the costs to households of the renewables obligation into public spending, and abolishing ECO with £1.5 billion extra allocated for the Warm Homes Plan. Now, I notice the party opposite now seems to claim this was their idea in the first place. But there is a crucial... I will in a minute. Let me just develop my argument. Now, I notice the party opposite, they say it was their idea in the first place, but there's a crucial difference. Because they proposed abolishing the RO, but with no way of paying for it. Yes, he says, but with no way of paying for it. This is a quite extraordinary, Madam Deputy. It's like all the sins of opposition combined into one. They had 14 years to do it, but they never did. Right? So suddenly it's a great idea to just abolish the renewables obligation. Yes, he says, but he, of course, was an energy minister and he never did it. Now he looks a bit sheepish, doesn't he, Madam Deputy Speaker? Which is rare for the honourable gentleman. And basically, I think this is their argument. They're just going to rip up all of the contracts that they've made, sending a message to every investor in Britain that the British government will not honour the contracts they sign. By the way, including lots of the contracts that they signed. So even the contracts they signed. Now, actually what this is, of course, if this had been a remotely serious policy, they'd have done it in government. But it's not a remotely serious policy because they're not a remotely serious party. That is the truth. And in fact, it is all more Liz Truss. They will the ends, so they want the cuts in energy bills, good, but without the foggiest idea of how to pay for it. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, taken together, on energy and more generally, the choices made at this budget will make life more affordable for people and begin to tackle the problems I've outlined. I give way.
Secretary of State for giving way. £150 off energy bills, which are already £200 higher than when he came into government, and £300 were meant to come off them. So are bills going to be higher or lower than when he came into government last year?
Yeah, higher. Look at the average of bills in 2025. If you look at the average of bills in 2025 versus 2024, they're lower. But I hope she'll support our cuts to energy bills when they come in April. Now, the second point. Let me make a bit more progress. The second point I want to come to is public spending. Because in both the spending review and the budget, my right honourable friend made a crucial decision, which is not to return to austerity. Now, she could have made a different choice, which I think is where they back to cut public services. We know, Madam Deputy Speaker, from the last 14 years, the impact of this approach. This is about living standards. This is about living standards of millions of people across our country who cannot buy their way to private healthcare or private schools. And what's so important about this, and in a way it can be hidden in all of the sort of smokescreen they want to put up, is that the Chancellor has made incredibly important decisions to invest in the future, which is what has enabled the government to cut NHS waiting lists by over 200,000, roll out free breakfast clubs in schools, expanded free school meals, funded the expansion of free childcare, and announced the biggest boost to investment in social and affordable housing in a generation. Now, and they are back to austerity. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I thank the Minister very much for what he's saying, but in relation to the £150 energy dividend for people across the United Kingdom, how we seem to lack in the Red Book some of the more detail for Northern Ireland and how it's going to work. And perhaps the Minister could indicate how the support for Northern Ireland will be the £150 that's going to be here for England. We really need to make sure that we're receiving the same in Northern Ireland as they are here on the mainland. Thank you.
The honourable gentleman is asking an important question. Let me write him with the detail on the point that he's made. We want as many people across our country to benefit from this as possible. So, by making different choices from the past, my right honourable friend is able to invest in the long term, and delivering the highest levels of public investment this country has seen in 4 decades. Okay, I'll give way to him.
Giving way. At the last general election, he and all his colleagues said they're going to raise taxes by £7 billion and their plans were fully funded and fully costed. So what democratic mandate does he claim to have to increase taxes by £66 billion and buy debt by a further £70 billion as well?
I tell you, the mandate the British people voted for is to change this country from the problems that we inherited from the last government. Now, let me develop my argument, Madam Deputy Speaker, because this is crucial, because we can only tackle the affordability crisis that people face by investing in the future. And our vision, I won't for a moment, our vision of what makes an economy succeed is just different from theirs. We believe that public investment crowds in, doesn't crowd out private investment, that the only route to economic success is a government that supports industry and workers with a proper industrial strategy, and that rights at work and strong trade unions are not an impediment to the good economy, but an essential ingredient of this. And nowhere is this more apparent, Madam Deputy Speaker, than in clean energy. Since the election, we've seen the largest public investment in homegrown clean energy in our history, leveraging private sector investment, and this is the point, of over £60 billion. The largest nuclear building programme in half a century, Sizewell C, SMRs, fusion at West Burton, that they failed to deliver, funding for carbon capture in Teesside, Humberside, Scotland and the North West, that they failed to deliver, and the first new publicly owned energy company in more than 70 years, Great British Energy, that they oppose. I give way to my honourable friend.
In the east of England, we welcome the government and private sector investment in Sizewell C and in a clean energy supply chain that will stretch from Suffolk through to Essex. Would you agree with me that the budget offers tax incentives to start-ups and scale-ups in that sector that will help that supply chain to flourish and bring energy bills down even further?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I saw recently in North Wales when we announced the SMR fleet there, Wilver, the huge opportunities not just where the nuclear power stations are being built, but rippling across the supply chain. That's why I'm so proud of the investments that we've been able to make. And what is the result? New jobs building wind turbines, I won't for a few minutes, new jobs building wind turbines at Siemens Gamesa in Hull, new jobs making transformers in Stafford, new jobs making heat pumps in Derby, and new jobs at Sumitomo's new factory at the Port of Nig. Part of the 400,000 additional clean energy jobs we expect our mission to support by 2030. And this is the difference. Because what is their policy, Madam Deputy Speaker? They want to rip up the Climate Change Act, abandon net zero by 2050, their own legacy. Their own legacy. And as a result, they've been roundly condemned by British business. Energy UK says it will scare off investors. The CBI says it's a backward step because the Climate Change Act is, and I quote, a bedrock for investment flowing into the UK. Baroness May, they don't like to talk about Baroness May, she called it a catastrophic mistake. And get this, even Boris Johnson. I mean, rarely have I quoted Boris Johnson, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my party, he says, it's all about bashing the green agenda. And personally, I don't think we'll get elected on that, on saying what rubbish net zero is. Now, I do have to say to the right honourable lady, normally, and I have experience of this, opposition stick by what they did right and trash what they did wrong. She's pursuing a novel approach to opposition. Trash anything they did right, and double down on everything they did wrong. And nowhere is that more true than on our dependence on fossil fuels. And at this point, I want to express my sincere thanks, and he's sadly not here, to her honourable friend, the member for South Suffolk, on the front bench. Because last week I was talking about the causes of the energy bills crisis of 2021. And he shouted out, and I did check the Hansard reference on this, he shouted out, and I quote, "because Putin invaded Ukraine." Now, obviously he's one of the finest minds on the opposition front bench. He is right about this. But he's given the game away, hasn't he? Because about the lessons of the worst cost of living crisis in generations, and this goes to affordability and this budget debate, it was because Putin invaded Ukraine. And what was the cause of higher bills? Why were we worse hit than many others? Because we were so exposed to fossil fuels. It wasn't the price of renewables that soared, it was the price of gas, sold and priced on the international market, including from the North Sea. Madam Deputy Speaker, that's what happens when you don't have clean homegrown power. That's what happens when you're at the mercy of petrostates and dictators. And what is her strategy now? To double down on their failure. She literally says, cancel the AR7 auction. They are the people, yes, she sounds, they're the people who lost it all in the fossil fuel casino. And now they say, let me just have one more go at the roulette wheel. This time it will be different. Cross your fingers and hope for the best. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, let's just think about this. What are they betting on? What are they betting on? In today's world, at this moment of all moments, with the world at its most perilous for generations, they cross their fingers and have a policy that hopes for everlasting peace in the world and no geopolitical I won't, no. I've already given way to you. And no geopolitical instability. With Russia, no thank you. With Russia still at war in Ukraine, with deep tensions in the Middle East, with NATO being tested. Madam Deputy Speaker, what ridiculous irresponsibility from them. When we know half of our recessions since the 1970s, I think you should listen to this, when we know half of our recessions since the 1970s have been caused by fossil fuel shocks, and the world is so much more unstable. And here's the worst thing of all, Madam Deputy Speaker. It wasn't their energy bills they were betting with, it was the British people's. Families, businesses, the public finances still paying the price of their failure, and not a word of apology, not a word of contrition. Indeed, the Right Honourable Lady now has to pretend black is white, ignore the dangers and claim fossil fuels are cheaper, when actually strike prices for solar and onshore wind in last year's auction were nearly 50% cheaper than the levelised cost estimate to build and operate a new gas plant. Madam Deputy Speaker, the truth is they have learned nothing and must never be let near the levers of power again. And this is the truth about the difference between us. We make fair choices, they would double down on unfair choices. We invest in the future, they would return us to austerity. We are building an economic future for the country, and they would destroy the economic opportunities and the security of the clean energy economy. Let me conclude. This is a budget that, despite the challenges, provides a clear direction of travel on the biggest issue of our time, the affordability crisis. This is a budget that shows a government which is acting on the #1 issue facing the British people. This is a budget for fair choices, investing in public services and creating a better economy. That's why this budget deserves support in the lobbies tomorrow night.
Yeah. I call the Shadow Secretary of State, Claire Coutinho.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. That was a fine performance, but I think anyone listening to it out there will think that he's on cloud cuckoo land. Yeah. They have taxed working families up the wazoo. They've taxed tens of thousands of people out of their jobs. They are clobbering them left, right and centre with rising bills. And for what? Not for growth. No, there's none of that coming. It was so that they could go on a welfare spending spree. But in the election, they promised the public they would not lift the two-child benefit cap, just like they promised they wouldn't raise taxes on working people. Yeah. They have broken promise after promise and fudged the reasons why, to say the least. And now in this debate, they want a thank you from the public because they've handed them back a tiny fraction of the money that they took from them in the first place. Well, I can tell you, the public are thinking of a phrase that ends in you.
Order. Secretary of State knows not to use the term you because she's obviously not referring to me. Shadow Secretary of State.
Well, I can tell you the public are thinking of a phrase that ends in you, but the first word isn't thanks. They want to talk about cost of living, but they are clobbering low and middle earners with tax rises and higher bills. That's why the majority of the country says this budget will leave their family worse off. The majority of the country has also said they think this budget is unfair. He talked about fairness. The public do not feel this is fair, and they are right. All the things, I'll just make a bit of progress and I'll give way. All the things that hurt disposable income are up. Inflation, bills, taxes are up. And the things which help growth and employment are down. That's why household disposable income has been revised down because of this budget. I'll give way on that point.
The Shadow Secretary, she wants to talk about fairness. One of the very practical consequences of retaining the two-child cap was that 3,000 women had to declare to a DWP official that they had been raped in order to be exempted. The member opposite is saying wind up, wind up. Could she clarify for me why she thinks that would be fair?
Madam Deputy Speaker, she makes an impassioned case. The question is, why did they not make it at the election?
Exactly.
Why did they remove the whip? Why did they remove the whip from 7 Labour MPs who voted against it last year? Why did they make all of them vote to keep the cap, including the Secretary of State? That's the question that they need to ask. They want to be known as a government that's helped people with the cost of living. They must think that the public are stupid. Everyone can see out there that everything that they are doing is making the cost of living worse. They don't understand the basics, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I think the situation is apparently so bad that Number 10 have been giving backbenchers lessons about the government debt. Can I suggest, having seen them cheer at 2 jobs-killing budgets now, that maybe they need to expand the curriculum?
Isn't the truth here that what we have in front of us is not the budget of the Chancellor or the Prime Minister nor the Cabinet, but the budget of the backbenchers?
Well, my honourable friend is right, and here is the problem. It might be a budget that has made the backbenchers happy, but it is not the budget that they promised at the election. Now, let me help them. I'll start with inflation. We left them with inflation back under control at 2%. It took difficult decisions.
That's a statement of fact.
It took difficult decisions, which needless to say that they opposed. But it was important because inflation hurts. It picks the pockets of families who find themselves working just as hard, but able to afford less and less. But under Labour, inflation has doubled. Thanks to the choices they made at the last budget. We've now broken away from our international peers. They can go and check the graphs. We have significantly higher inflation than Europe and the US. In fact, we have the highest inflation of any major economy. And the OBR has said, compared to March, they now expect inflation to be higher for longer. Why? Because they've chosen to make the cost of energy and the cost of food more expensive and to pursue policies that will push rent up. People's weekly shop is up because of Labour's choices. Taxes upon taxes, a jobs tax, a packaging tax, the family farm tax. These are their choices. And all of that means the average family will pay almost £300 more for their groceries this year. With their war on farmers, is it any surprise a pack of mints, a family staple, is up 40% this year alone? Or let's take housing. Rent is going up by £700 this year for the average renter. They don't understand that a lower supply of homes to rent means higher rents. Here it is, black and white in the OBR document. Their new housing taxes risk, and I quote, a steady long-term rise in rents. Their choices. The cost of going away on a family holiday will set you back up to £400 extra because of Labour's flight tax, £300 more for food, £700 for rent, £400 for a holiday. That's £1,400, and I haven't even got to energy bills or taxes yet. Now, on energy, where do we even start? I'll give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Thank her for giving way. She has repeatedly suggested in her contributions that energy bills are going up. Now, if she doesn't believe me, perhaps she'll believe Martin Lewis, the money-saving expert, who tweeted out just earlier today. I've just got the new predictions for the April price cap, which is a cut in cost of 4.2%. Without the budget changes, it would be predicted to be rising 3.5%. So can she please perhaps correct the record and explain why she does not support the work we are doing to cut energy bills?
I will come to what Martin Lewis says about his policies in a second. They promised £300 off bills, but bills have gone up by £200 instead. Going by his own election promise, he owes the public a £500 cut. And why have they gone up? Because of the cost of this Secretary of State. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can just ask Martin Lewis. Wholesale prices have plummeted, but energy bills are up because there are countless costs landing on those bills thanks to him. The Honourable Gentleman wanted to hear Martin Lewis a second ago, doesn't want to hear him now. The cost of backing up wind farms, switching them off when it's too windy, all the grid costs which are multiple times higher because of the system they're creating, the warm homes discount which everyone out there is paying for through their bills, the carbon tax which has gone up by 70% this year, the tax on gas to pay for hydrogen which is coming in January. I'm not sure if these backbenchers know about all of these costs, but they add up to hundreds and hundreds of pounds extra. No wonder he never did a costing. He didn't want anyone to know the truth. He is piling hundreds and hundreds of pounds onto energy bills, and now he wants a round of applause for this £150 off. Well, let's talk about the £150. I'll just make this argument. Firstly, if you have a gas boiler, it's £130, and I'll remind them that's almost everybody in the country. Oh yes, and if you pay tax, the cost actually hasn't come off. They've just moved it from your energy bill to your tax bill. And most importantly, it doesn't even touch the sides of what this Secretary of State is going to cost you in the end. Like so much of what they say, it is just a sleight of hand, Madam Deputy Speaker. Yes. The real question is this. From the election, are bills going up or down? The answer is up. Yeah. And he should just be honest. This policy was never part of his plan. It's not part of Great British Energy or Clean Power 2030, all the things which he promised would lower bills. In fact, it's a tacit admission that he has failed. The centre know that his plans can't lower bills. In fact, if the reporting is correct, he fought against this policy. But he's been forced into it because his promise to cut bills by £300 has become a national embarrassment to them all. And it is taxpayers who are bailing him out to the tune of £7 billion. I'll give way on that point.
Does she not share the concerns already articulated by the CBI that to simply scrap the Climate Change Act, to scrap the important work of this government in pursuing net zero targets, is a backward step, and it will actually be to the detriment of people's energy bills, to inward investment into our economy, and it will kill off jobs as well? These are the words of the CBI.
Look, we can exchange quotes, but the honourable gentleman might want to go and look. Well, look, let me respond. He can go and check the quotes of the most respected energy economist in the country, Sir Dieter Helm, which says their plan is locking people into higher bills for longer. I think one of the fundamental problems that we have in this country is that energy costs are too high, and what this Secretary of State is doing is locking people into those higher prices for longer. If they had truly wanted to cut bills for everyone, I did hand them our cheap power plan, but you know what's extraordinary, Madam Deputy Speaker? They come up with a package that costs the Exchequer more, cuts bills by less, and does nothing to cut energy bills for struggling businesses. Food bills up, rents are up, cost of holidays are up, energy bills up, cost after cost after cost because of their policies. And they want a round of applause for moving a fraction of those costs off of someone's energy bill and straight onto their tax bill. Only people with the Labour Party's grasp of numbers could think that this is a good deal. He says there is an affordability crisis, but not the cause. They are the cause, and that's before we even get to tax. Taxes on student loans, taxes on income, taxes on saving, taxes on housing, taxes on driving, taxes on pension, even taxes on taxis. Mr. Speaker, if they could, Labour would tax the air that we breathe. Taxes are rising more in this Parliament than in any since the 1970s. The freeze in income tax thresholds means the average worker on 35 grand a year will lose £1,000 in tax by the end of the decade. That's an extra 2 weeks they'll be working not to feed their family, but to pay for Labour's benefit bill. And let's be clear, when they say they are asking for a contribution, they're not asking, are they? It's not like anyone can say no. I don't know if there's been any more irritating formulation of words than that phrase that we've heard so much over this weekend. There will be so many people out there who will be looking at this budget, and what they will think is, why do I bother? Why do I get up at 5:30? Why do I work overtime? Why do I barely see my family? Why am I going to pay more tax for people on benefits who are not working those hours? He talks... I'll have to give way on that point.
Pay for people on benefits, she says. People on benefits who are working, 60% of them are working. We're supporting people into work. Does she not agree?
I'll make this point to the honourable gentleman. The average person on benefits and work is working 20 hours, sometimes less. Why should a family who is not well off, who have kids of their own, who are working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, be worse off than a family on benefits working far fewer hours? And let me say this. Let me say this, Mr. Speaker. I quit a job in the city to go and work for the Centre for Social Justice, to work with people fighting poverty. I've worked with struggling families in some way since I was 16. It is not compassionate to make welfare pay more than work. It is not a helping hand. It is a trap. They should also talk to the many couples who have put off having children or stopped at 1 or 2 because they cannot afford it. The younger brothers and sisters who simply won't be born. Those missing children are a personal tragedy for every couple that is having to make that choice, but there will be more of those decisions because they are loading more and more costs and taxes onto hard-working families. I'll give way on that point.
Honourable Lady for once again giving way, but can she explain to the House what it would mean for the 1,360 children in her constituency and the nearly 1,700 children in my constituency who will remain in levels of relative poverty if we were to choose to pursue the two-child benefit cap for many more years, as she is suggesting we do so?
Think of the children. Madam Deputy Speaker, we have a fundamental difference in belief. They believe the best way out of poverty is welfare. I think the best way is jobs and growth, but they are killing those things. The problem with the Labour Party is that they clearly think the only answer, you can see this in their policies, they think the only answer to the cost of living is redistribution, even past the point where there will be no one left to redistribute from. On this side of the House, we know it is jobs, low taxes and low costs that improve the quality of life. They are killing those jobs. Every month under them, parents are losing their jobs. What do you think the cost of living is like for those families who have lost their salaries under this Labour government? There are 170,000 people on the payroll, 170,000 fewer people on the payroll since the election. Young people cannot get a foot on the jobs ladder. Because of them, the cost of hiring a young person has gone up by £4,000. They say they are raising the minimum wage, but they are crushing businesses' ability to pay for it. The result is hiring freezes and redundancies. And for all those people just above the minimum wage who are struggling as well, there will be no money left for wage progression. The best way to improve living standards is growth, Madam Deputy Speaker. But this wasn't a budget for growth. This was a budget for Labour backbenchers, and that's why it didn't have a single growth measure in it. Madam Deputy Speaker, in closing, I will say this. Labour's entire approach to the economy has been to raise the costs of basic goods, to raise taxes, to crush wages and employment. They are expecting a shrinking group of hard-working taxpayers to pay for more redistribution to cover the costs that they are choosing to impose on the public. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the words of one Labour Cabinet Minister, this budget has been a disaster. And those aren't my words. If you look at the number 10 source, the person that they think it is him. Madam Deputy Speaker, they will not be known as the party helping people with the cost of living. They will be known as the party that have broken their promises to working people, that have broken their promises on tax, that have broken their promises on bill, and who have broken the social contract that sees work pay more than welfare.
Colleagues can see looking around the chamber that it's a very long speaking list, so the backbenchers are on a speaking limit of 6 minutes, and Roshnara Ali 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy. This Labour government is rebuilding our economy, rebuilding our public services and addressing the cost of living pressures facing our constituents. This budget will make a huge difference to my constituents' lives, thanks to the cuts in energy bills, the freeze on rail fares, increases in the living wage and action to tackle child poverty. Inflation is coming down and forecast interest rates are also coming down. Growth this year and business investment over the course of this Parliament are forecast to rise. We inherited, Madam Deputy Speaker, a dire situation with public services on their knees, chronic underinvestment and a fiscal black hole. 14 years of Tory governments presiding over austerity, stagnant wages, the chaos of leaving the European Union and the Liz Truss mini-budget fiasco which sent markets into panic, mortgage rates soaring and inflation rates to over 11%. Madam Deputy Speaker, the cost of living the cost of leaving the EU is now estimated to be far more than previous estimates. The recent report by Stanford University found Brexit is reducing the UK's GDP by 6 to 8%, with the impact accumulating gradually over time. The report also found investment has reduced by between 12 to 18% and employment by 3 to 4%, productivity by 3 to 4% as well. I give way to my honourable friend.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way at such early stage in her excellent speech. She talked about the impact of austerity on the country's finances. I would also say that austerity had a huge impact on productivity,